Are you? All right. Are you ready, Jordan? What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Stokastic NBA Deeper Dive. And oh boy, is it an exciting night of sports, because we've got a 2-game NBA slate, a 1-game NFL slate. As you come in, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Got Adam and I doing the deep dive. Then after us, it's going to be Eric and Ryan on Live Before Lock. We've also got our NFL Live Before Lock show coming on after this. So all the content covered here on the channel. And don't forget, we have our Stokastic Hall of Fame that if you guys want to be a part of, when you finish at the top of a DFS contest, make sure you have the Stokastic avatar on your DFS handle, whether it be on FanDuel or DraftKings. Then tweet your wins at StokasticHOF on Twitter. You get yourself 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. And then also get added to our segment that we've been running in between shows. We reveal the Hall of Fame and our latest winners. Adam, what's going on? How's your day going?
Going pretty well. Wish we had more basketball games to talk about. Also wish we had more answers to the injury questions for the 2 basketball games that we have to talk about. But hopefully we'll get some of that during the show, and it'll give us, something to elaborate on.
Which, selfishly, I'm kind of happy we don't have it, because there's a part of me, I'm sitting here, it's like, boy, 2-game slate, and you and I, we have to talk about it for an hour. At least the different injuries, it gives us a lot of talking points where we can figure out what to do with different guys. So it really does help me direct the show. If we just had a 4-game slate where there was 0 value and there was nobody on the injury report, I'd be like, boy, we could really bang the show out in 8 minutes. But this gives us a little bit more talking points, which, at least from that standpoint, it's nice.
Yeah, and like on the show this morning, we were able to kill time by me just making fun of Eric, but you're not Eric, so those few minutes aren't going to be there.
Yeah, welcome to my Live Before Lock shows, where the 2-game slate, if Ryan and I didn't switch because Ryan was dealing with some bad weather and caught in traffic, that's absolutely what it would have been. Me hosting the Live Before Lock would have been like 4 minutes of Eric and I talking about our favorite plays, and then 56 minutes of myself in the audience making fun of them. So
glad you mentioned that, because I could have sworn when I looked earlier it was Ryan and not you, so I was really confused when I saw you.
Yeah, so what happened is Ryan was traveling today. There's some bad weather over in Chicago, and he just wasn't sure with the traffic situation if he was going to be here in time. He thought he was going to, but just in case, I switched with him just to avoid any kind of potential issue there, which seemed to make sense. And, instead I get to, it's nice also to mix it up with Eric. I really do get tired of him. So it's good to be doing the show with somebody else, break down some basketball. And I also want to know, just because 2-game slate as compared to a lot of the other size slates we typically get, whether it be, 11, 10, 6 games, whatever it may be, how does your approach change on a 2-game slate relative to some bigger NBA slates?
Mostly just being less restrictive with settings and rules, especially, in the case of if you happen to have, like last night, for example, I didn't actually set a rule to keep Damian Jones out of Thomas Bryant lineups. Not that I think I got them either anyway, but or Nick Richards out of Mason Plumlee lineups on the late slate, stuff like that. Whereas on larger slates, you certainly would. On a slate like tonight, like if Larry Nance is out, I'd be okay in a lineup here or there having Hernan Gomez with Joval, whereas I wouldn't on larger slate. So that's the biggest thing, is just not caring as much about, things like if I have 3 players from the same team or 4, or, players that maybe negatively correlate somewhat. I'm more willing to just, accept those risks.
Yeah, which it's kind of unavoidable, because if you set too many rules, what ends up happening, you run the lineups through Fantasy Cruncher and it says can't build lineups, because you get too restrictive, where obviously on a 2-game slate, if you say, hey, I don't want more than 2 players from any one team, well, then it can't build any lineup. So you do have to be a little bit looser about how you consider some of those things, like you just mentioned. And by the way, if anybody's watching and they're in our Discord channel, add us. If you have any strategy questions or questions specific to this slate, I will certainly be able to answer any and all of those questions today. So if that is anything you guys want to talk about, strategies, how we handle some of these slates, at me in Discord, and we could answer some of those questions. But let's start diving into this, Adam, and beginning with the San Antonio Spurs, who are the one team that don't have players who are listed as questionable. We still have somebody who's listed out. That is Keldon Johnson. So what does the absence of Keldon Johnson do for this Spurs team?
So it's going to make Trey Jones and Devin Vassell in particular look better. They both see a bump in production without Johnson on the floor. Vassell's usage rate jumps to about 26%. He's around 1.2 DraftKings points per minute. Trey Jones gets up to around 1.15 DraftKings points per minute. So both of those guys are going to look a little bit better than they would if Keldon Johnson were in. You're also likely to get Keita Bates-Diop in the starting lineup. That's not a really exciting play, but with it being a 2-game slate, he's $4,000. There is going to be some merit in looking to him as well. He's averaged 28 minutes per game as a starter so far this season. So at 4K, some benefit at least. One question I do have with San Antonio is who's going to be the fifth starter? We had Romeo Langford start the last game. Jeremy Sohan came off the bench, but we've also had a couple of times this year where like Devin Vassell's injured and then he comes back, plays a couple games off the bench and moves into the starting lineup. Jeremy Sohan started most of the year. I wouldn't be surprised if he does slide back in place of Langford, in which case he's going to go from like, he's still going to be Jeremy Sohan. So you're not going to be comfortable, but you would be able to, increase his minutes projection, and it would make him go from, sort of a reasonable value to someone that certainly looks a little bit better.
Yeah, and looking through some of the ownership projections, the player that is, well, a couple players that are very, very popular on FanDuel. Tre Jones projected for north of 50% ownership. Devin Vassell also projected north of 50% ownership. So just considering the amount of field of the field that is rostering those players, they are currently the fourth and sixth most popular players on FanDuel. Obviously, they're good points per dollar plays. Devin Vassell being 7,000 on FanDuel, Tre Jones being 6,300. But what do you make of them when they're both north of 50% owned on a 2-game slate? How would you look to differentiate it all, or are you just okay with them being that popular?
I think I'm okay with them being that popular. It's just, it's a 2-game slate, so there's limited alternatives. That could certainly change based on what injury news we get from some of these other teams. But, right now I think it makes sense. We have Tre Jones with a 52% chance of being optimal on FanDuel, 49% coming into Devin Vassell. They're both just really cheap. Jones is $200 less expensive than he is on DraftKings. Vassell is $400 less expensive than he is on DraftKings. So it just kind of highlights how cheap those guys are, and they look like really good plays.
Yeah, and by the way, the crunches that I ran before, I didn't get wildly different exposures to the field, but Vassell over on FanDuel, I ended up getting to 56%. Tre Jones, I got to 46%. So fairly close to what the field is doing with those guys. Something else that I think is pretty key when it comes to the Spurs, how many minutes are you anticipating Jakob Poeltl playing? So a couple games under his belt since coming back from injury, but limited minutes in each of those. So what are you expecting from him from a playing time perspective?
So I went 26. I'm not entirely sure. That was something that Eric and I talked about a lot this morning. He was limited to 20 minutes, like explicitly in that first game. Then last game, he played 22 and a half. But that's a game where he did play around 12 and a half minutes in the first half. You got blowout run at the end. So I think he probably lost a couple of minutes there. I think he was likely to play 24, 25 minutes had that game been competitive to the end. So I think going 26 to him, 22 to Zach Collins makes sense to me.
Yeah, so then that would mean no other centers in the rotation. So like Charles Bassey falling out then, I assume?
Yeah, I didn't give Bassey any minutes. He only played 3 minutes of garbage time last game. So as far as competitive minutes go, you were just getting either Poeltl or Collins for every minute.
And then just because it's a 2-game slate, we don't typically talk about the deep end of the benches for some of these teams. Like if it's a 7 or 8-game slate, we would never be talking about the guys like Doug McDermott or anything like that. I knew I mentioned Jeremy Sohan as somebody who you think could potentially be an under-owned flyer in large field tournaments, particularly if he moves into the starting lineup. But is there anything else we should be paying attention to at low ownership at the end of the Spurs bench?
Yeah, so Josh Richardson's back today. He's 4,200. I have him in for 22 minutes, but he's somebody that certainly could play 24, 26 minutes. So he at least has some upside, I think. He's only pulling 6% ownership. Same goes for Jeremy Sohan, who's 3,600, pulling 6% ownership. And also Keita Bates-Diop, 4K, pulling 6% ownership. I think he's going a little bit under-owned if he does start. I think him getting 26 to 28 minutes is your most likely outcome. So as outside of the Vassell, Poeltl, Tre Jones, Zach Collins pieces that I think are the 4 best options here, Bates-Diop, Richardson, Sohan become the next group of guys in terms of interest for me.
Is there anything else you want to talk about when it comes to the Spurs?
Just a reminder. So like I have Sohan in for 22 minutes right now, assuming he comes off the bench. If he starts, I would go up to 26 and it would make him look quite a bit better.
All right. So something else, I'll do this at the tail end of each team after we talk about, I'll say the 2 most popular players on DraftKings and FanDuel from those teams. So I already mentioned it from FanDuel, the 2 most popular players on the Spurs. Number 1, it is Devin Vassell, projected for 52% ownership. Then just behind him, We have Trey Jones projected for 51% ownership. Nobody quite that popular from the Spurs over on DK, but we do have Vassell projected for 37% ownership as the most popular player on the team. And then Trey Jones, also the second most popular on DK, projected for 30% ownership. So let's move on to the New Orleans Pelicans. But first, shout out to BetMGM, sponsor of today's show. And if you guys have not signed up at BetMGM yet, this is the easiest way to get in the door over at Stokastic.com. If you've been trying or wanting to try out our tools, you could get 2 months of our platinum tools for free when you sign up at BetMGM using the link that we have below, also about to be thrown into the YouTube comments. So you're going to get 2 free months of Stokastic Plus Platinum. But in addition, you're also going to get a risk-free bet of up to $1,000. So a lot of good value coming with this BetMGM offer. And it's something that I don't know how long it's going to be in existence for. So while it is out there, it is something I think you guys should be taking advantage of. Adam, I know that you have been more hip to betting now that it's been legalized in your state. Only 2 games, but do you have any bets for today?
No, I haven't looked at anything.
Okay, so I have one. I posted in my Discord channel as well. And one thing that I've really liked is, I don't know if you noticed, DraftKings has head-to-head markets where it's like, will this player score more points than this player? Will this player have more turnovers than this player? And it's a really inefficient market. And one thing I've noticed is for today, the over-under for turnovers for CJ McCollum is 2.5. The over-under for turnovers for Jakob Poeltl is 1.5. But in the head-to-head market, Jakob Poeltl is a pick'em versus CJ McCollum for who will have less turnovers. So I use that as a benchmark for finding value a lot of times in those head-to-head markets. So I do have a bet on Jakob Poeltl to have less turnovers than CJ McCollum, and also Jakob Poeltl seemingly with a light minutes restriction. CJ McCollum a little more usage, more ball handling duties going to him with Zion out of the mix. So I like Jakob Poeltl to have less turnovers than CJ McCollum, particularly when it's just a pick 'em bet there. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so let's move on to the New Orleans Pelicans, and lots of injury news when it comes to New Orleans. So in terms of players that are currently questionable, it's Larry Nance Jr., and he's going to have a massive impact on Jonas Valanciunas if he gets ruled out. But in addition to that, Zion Williamson, he's out in health and safety protocols, and we've got Brandon Ingram. He remains out with a toe injury. So first, let's start by talking about Larry Nance being questionable. And what ends up happening to Jonas Valanciunas' minutes if Nance does not play?
So if Nance doesn't play, Valanciunas looks really good. Obviously, you're coming off of that last game where he was fantastic. I'm still pissed off I didn't really play him on that slate. But he played 36, 37 minutes. In 2 previous games without Nance, he had played 30 minutes in the first game, but then only 20 minutes in the second game. And in that second game, you had Zion Williamson close at the 5. So going into last game, that was still something that you needed to consider. Obviously, Zion's not closing at the 5 in this one. So if Nance is out, you're just talking about a center rotation of Jonas Valanciunas, Billy Hernan-Gomez, and maybe Jackson Hayes, picks up some minutes in case of emergency. But it would really increase the likelihood that Joval is playing big minutes here. And then you're also getting that bump in production from Zion not being out there. So it's just going to make Joval look good, very good if Nance is out. And I think he looks good even if Nance is in, because there is a difference here as well between this time and the last time that we had Zion out. The last time Zion was out, I'm not sure if you remember, but I do because it was really, really frustrating. Larry Nance was really popular because everybody convinced themselves that Zion being out meant more minutes for Larry Nance, even though he had played a total of like 1 minute or 0 minutes alongside Jonas Valanciunas to that point in the season. Larry Nance ended up having a big game simply because Joval got in foul trouble. And so you had this really popular Larry Nance that was,
I love Adam's new setup, by the way. We were just complimenting it before the show started. Look, Adam, I love how you redid your setup, the new looks to your apartment, and then it breaks 15 minutes into the first show you do with it.
Yeah, that I kind of thought that was going to happen, but I figured it would. I thought it would last like a day or two. I didn't think I was going to do it like an hour later. But so back to the Nance point. At the time, you were just getting no minutes from Nance and Joval playing alongside each other. Now you actually have been getting them alongside each other a bit. They've now played 29 total minutes alongside each other. Still not a lot, but more than we were getting for most of the season. So I do think there's a chance now with Zion out that you get a few minutes alongside each other, which is good for Joval's playing time, in addition to Nance's. So I think that's worth mentioning as well. But clearly, If Nance is out, Joval looks great. If Nance is in, he still looks very good. Like, we have Nance projected in right now, and we still have Joval projected for 68% ownership on DraftKings and projecting higher than 6x.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I want to ask you too, because I agree with you. I think Jonas Valanciunas, if you guys are totally insane people and you're playing a lot of cash games on a 2-game slate, I think you should be playing Valanciunas whether Nance is in or not. But in large field tournaments, I ended up getting a little bit underweight to Valanciunas in the builds I ran right now. And this is, by the way, assuming that Nance is in. It doesn't mean that I don't think Valanciunas isn't a good play, because I do have him projected really well. I just ended up coming in underweight to these ownership numbers because he's projected for 68% ownership on DraftKings right now. On FanDuel, he's projected for 54% ownership. If Nance is in, once again, it's not to say the Valanciunas isn't a good play. I just think it's a little bit too much ownership.
Yeah, I mean, I think where that can kind of be illustrated too by like comparing him to the centers we just talked about on San Antonio. Do I think Joval is a better play than Jakob Poeltl and Zach Collins? Both, yes. I don't think he's 6 times better than Zach Collins. I don't think he's 3 times better than Jakob Poeltl. He's certainly better, but then you're going to have an appealing center from Washington as well, whether it's Kristaps Porzingis or Daniel Gafford. Both of those, whichever of those guys is starting, is going to end up looking good. So I'm with you where Joval looks like a very good play. That also seems like a little bit too much ownership, given the volatility that still comes with being a center.
By the way, what fell off your wall before?
It's like I don't even know how to describe it. It's not a poster, but it's like a poster. It's like it's like a metallic poster kind of thing. But I messed up the backing to it when I moved apartments, and this was the first time that I had hung it up since I'd been here, and so I had a feeling it was going to fall. But
you should, before I read it, if you have the YouTube chat open, you should see the super chat we just got. So the super chat is very clever by whoever decided to make a new YouTube account or change their name to the picture on Adam's wall, which is also a screenshot of Adam's face and just says help. So no other information there. But that is hilarious. Whoever it is that threw that in, if you also want to ask a DFS question, just throw that into chat and I will be answering it. But I didn't want to read that until I made sure that you saw it before I just read it out.
I was mostly just relieved when I realized what it was, because before it fell, I could just hear it like sliding. So I knew it was going to fall, but I just keep hearing this like noise behind me. And I know all that's behind me is like a wall and a window. And so I'm just like, I don't know what is behind me. And it was kind of like freaking me out until I realized what it was.
Yeah. Don't worry. If we're ever on a show and there's somebody creeping up behind you with a knife, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
If I'm doing a show with Eric, it's a different story. With you, I'm going to let you know if somebody's creeping up behind you. But what in your head were you thinking it could possibly be that was behind you?
Nothing. I just was really confused. And then once, like, I turned around, you were talking, and I like turned around and looked, and I saw the poster and was like, oh, that thing's just about to fall down.
Well, there we go. We got that sorted out. Mystery solved. And once again, thank you to the super chat from the picture on Adam's wall, who down but not forgotten. The picture has left us a super chat. So getting back to talking about the New Orleans Pelicans, we talked about the Nance situation, how it impacts Jonas Valanciunas. We talked about Nance, him potentially being an option if he ends up playing. But now if Nance gets ruled out, who are the other guys who could step into more minutes for the Pelicans that would then become better plays outside of Valanciunas?
So it's guys that, Billy Hernangomez is the guy that clearly just becomes viable that isn't if Nance plays. You have him at 3K. He's a really good point per minute guy. I kind of mentioned it at the top of the show, but on a 2-game slate, I would have no issue just playing Joval and Hernangomez. You're spending 9K for 2 very, very good point per minute centers. He's the guy that would go from, I think, just like non-existent to a good play. The rest of the guys mostly are players that are viable anyway, but will just look better because, I do think there's a chance that you see a little bit of Nance playing alongside Joval. Obviously, if he's out, that's not going to happen, and I certainly don't expect any Hernangomez alongside Joval. So, guys like Najee Marshall, Dyson Daniels are going to look, maybe a little bit better if Nance is out. But I think the big impact is on Hernangomez.
Yeah, I think that definitely totally makes sense. If we see Hernangomez, especially because it's a 2-game slate, there are that many value options to get to. Hernangomez is cheap on both FanDuel and DraftKings, and also not a bad pivot off of Valanciunas. I mean, you and I were talking about before how we would make less restrictions for a 2-game slate. You could certainly play them together. But think about this. If you build a lineup that is, if Nance is ruled out and you play a lineup with Hernangomez that doesn't have Valanciunas, Valanciunas is prone to get into foul trouble. If Valanciunas gets into foul trouble, you probably have the best leverage play on the slate in your hands.
Yeah. The problem is that in a lot of those lineups, I'm still going to have Joval. But yeah, like that's also extremely true.
So let's talk about some of the backcourt guys, because I think it stands to reason that some of these players are also going to be impacted by the absence of Zion. The primary one being CJ McCollum. So McCollum going to have to do a little bit of everything today for the Pelicans. The ball is going to be in his hands a ton. His usage is going to go up. How much of a priority does that make CJ McCollum, who is massively popular tonight?
Eric and I went on for a while about this today because I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen here, and there's nothing I can really do about it. My expectation is that I end up playing a lot of CJ McCollum because Ingram's out, Zion's out. His rates look really good. He projects well. Then he's going to shoot like 5 for 30 because he's not very good anymore. I don't know if it's injury related. I don't know what it is. If he's just lost a step, getting older, like we had kind of seen that start to happen in Portland before the trade. He's really, really weird this year where if you look at CJ McCollum's fantasy production and you don't account for anybody being on or off the floor, so just overall this season, he has a 25% usage rate, a 24% assist percentage, and he's averaged 1.04 DraftKings points per minute. If you take Zion and Ingram off the floor, he's played 253 minutes. Usage rate goes from 25% to 28.8. Assist percentage goes from 24% to 29.9. DraftKings points per minute go from 1.04 to 1.03 because his true shooting goes from 50% to 43.9. So on the one hand, you can look at that as a positive if you want to and say, like, look, CJ McCollum cannot possibly be less efficient going forward than he has in this situation previously, and he's still averaged over a fantasy point per minute. That just kind of reiterates how good of a play he is because he's likely to play around 36 minutes. Even if you call it a fantasy point per minute, on a 2-game slate, that's a perfectly good projection, and you really can't expect him to shoot worse. On the other hand, you have an 82% owned guy that has nobody to pull the defense away from him now. Nobody cares about Trey Murphy, and definitely nobody cares about Herb Jones. Like Joval obviously can do stuff offensively, but you don't have Ingram to pull the defense away. You don't have Zion, who's going to be a defensive focus. You have this guy that seemingly has lost a step and or is hurt and is just going to be the entire focal point of the defense. So it makes sense that he is less efficient, even though, again, I don't think he's going to continue to be that inefficient. So that's the concern for me, is just that it's really difficult. I think probably the most difficult thing in projecting NBA, at least for me, is a situation like this where if you just plug in CJ McCollum's rates and your model is just using, you plug in CJ McCollum's usage rate and your model's just using CJ McCollum's typical efficiency, he's going to be this absolutely amazing play. And that's why you're getting 82% ownership. I don't really know how far I'm supposed to drop him for the fact that he cannot score on his own at this point.
Yeah. And to tag and add on to that, I would say that there's a couple of things that are really difficult to account for. That's one of them. The other one is the per minute rates of players who go from a bench role to a starting role, because you never know, like, okay, they've been playing against lesser competition. How often do we see big men that just crush against backup big men and they go into the starting lineup and they're just nowhere near the same fantasy producer? Stuff also, when players get ruled out from one team, and if it's a good defensive player like a Rudy Gobert, how does it impact the offense from the other team? There are things that are hard to take into account, like you saying here with CJ McCollum. At a certain point, you kind of have to take a leap of faith and say, this is what I think the outcome is going to be. And I agree with you. I think the rates are probably going to drop a little bit for McCollum here, but I think the volume probably just outweighs it, and it makes him overall the best play on the slate.
Yeah, and so that's where I come in at as well, and it's why I think it's very likely that I play a lot of McCollum and then just end up bitching about it and saying, see, I knew I shouldn't have played that much. But again, like with a 44% true shooting percentage, he's still averaging a point per minute just based on volume. So he can shoot incredibly bad, like worst player in the NBA bad, and still get you 36, 37 DraftKings points.
Yeah, and another thing too is there's just more margin for error on a 2-game slate too. There aren't that many guys to go to, so I think McCollum pretty unavoidable, as the field thinks the same way. McCollum 82% owned on DraftKings, 80% on FanDuel, the most popular player on both sites. And I know it's early; we haven't submitted any lineups officially or anything, but at that kind of ownership, would you anticipate yourself being overweight to McCollum, underweight, or about even with the field?
My guess right now is I come in about even, just because he is such a good play. The other thing is that So far, at least, I'm not seeing plays that I think are really under-owned. It would be different if it was just like, oh, well, McCollum is 82%, and I think Devin Vassell's going overlooked, but you have like 40% ownership coming into Devin Vassell. I don't think McCollum is twice as good as Vassell, but I also don't really think Vassell's going under-owned. So it's just a situation like I don't really know where I'm going. If I get away from McCollum just because of ownership, I don't really know where I'm going either.
Yeah, the other thing too is it's like, oh, cool, I'm gonna pivot off an 80% owned guy for a 65% owned guy. It's because all of those guys that are in that price range, particularly on DraftKings, they're really popular. So, or also FanDuel as well. So McCollum's 8,500 projected for 80% ownership. Kuzma 8,300 projected for 66% ownership. Markkanen 8,200 projected for 58% ownership. So it's not like you're finding some ownership reprieve going elsewhere. You're still rostering other guys that are really popular. We'll talk more about the Pelicans and the other options in a second, but I want to catch up on some of these super chats because we had a bunch of these go in so we can hit on some of your guys' questions that you have. First, the question here is from the Claw 28. He wants to know who's the best small forward on the San Antonio Spurs for DraftKings purposes. All right. So the Spurs, the player with small forward eligibility that I got the most exposure to is Vassell, and it's not really close.
Yeah, I'll say for sure Devin Vassell. If you have to go to someone other, like if you needed a cheaper one for some reason, I would say Josh Richardson's next, but Devin Vassell, it's not close.
Yeah, Vassell is that for me. Michael McKinney wants to know who are the 5 top plays for FanDuel cash games. So the easiest cash game play on the slate is CJ McCollum. You absolutely should be playing, need to play CJ McCollum in cash. Same goes for Jonas Valanciunas. Now, some of this is going to change depending on injury news, but Valanciunas is somebody I envision you'd want to play in cash games no matter what on both FanDuel and DraftKings. Kuzma and Markkanen, they're both projected for north of 50% ownership, and they're pretty good pay up options. Honestly, we're particularly on FanDuel. The pricing is fairly soft. So I would say McCollum, Kuzma, Markkanen, Valanciunas as those 4. And then I'm going to add Bradley Beal into the mix because number one, I think he looks good now, but I think you're definitely going to want to have him in as well if Kristaps Porzingis gets rolled out later in the day. So for FanDuel, I'm going to say McCollum, Kuzma, Markkanen, Valanciunas, Bradley Beal. Anybody else that you would look at as like a must play type play for FanDuel cash, Adam?
I'd add that you're probably going to want one of the value pieces from the Pels just to open things up. We don't know yet what the starting lineup's going to be. We know Herb Jones is going to be in it. We know Trey Murphy's going to be in it. I don't know if the final spot is going to be Najee Marshall, Dyson Daniels, or Jose Alvarado. But you have Marshall at 4,600, Daniels at 4K, Murphy at 52, Jones at 51, Alvarado at 51. I think getting to some part of that in addition to the actual good players that you mentioned.
The next super chat we have here, it is from STLVids09. He wants to know, is Keita Bates-Diop a good value play? I would say he's playable. I wouldn't go as far as to call him good. If you had him in a couple lineups, that's fine. But the spots where you and I have rostered Keita Bates-Diop has been when there's been more players out for the Spurs, with Vassell healthy, with Trey Jones in there, with Josh Richardson being active today. It's hard to prioritize Keita Bates-Diop, particularly if you're somebody who's only playing one lineup. Bates-Diop would not be in that lineup for me.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I view it as well. Like I mentioned him when we talked about the Spurs, that I think it's interesting he's only getting 6% ownership. I have him in for 28 minutes. I have him at like 21 DraftKings points. We have him at about 21 DraftKings points. So he looks fine. But the thing is that you have all of these guys on New Orleans that look better because of Ingram being out and Zion being out. So if you're playing one lineup, you're just trying to fill one spot and you don't care about ownership, there's a lot of plays that look like better value than Keita Bates-Diop. If you're talking about an individual lineup in a large field tournament where you do need a low-owned guy, then yeah, I think he's a good value play amongst the guys that aren't getting ownership.
Got a question here from XX Cubs fan 23XX. He wants to know how to sign up for my Discord channel. So there's a page over at Stokastic.com, and there is the insider access page. If you click on my link, it's 1 week free access using the promo code GINSIDER, but I'll send you the link after this as well. And you get 1 week for free. Mr. Sledge to you, if Porzingis sits, would you prefer Beasley Clarkson or Clarkson Vanderbilt? So Clarkson's in both of these. So basically he's asking if Porzingis is out, we prefer Beasley or Vanderbilt, and neither of them are impacted by Porzingis. So
yeah, I'm not entirely sure what it has to do with Porzingis, but I think they're really close. That's actually a really interesting conversation regarding Utah's rotations in general. I would, I guess, lean Vanderbilt just because we have seen him getting more minutes, but I'm not very confident that you're going to see that same Utah rotation tonight against Washington that you did against Detroit and against Cleveland.
yeah, so Beasley or Vanderbilt, I would lean towards Vanderbilt right now. But oh, would I feel like such a fish if I targeted Vanderbilt and he gets into foul trouble for the millionth time this year? Like my biggest concern with Vanderbilt is that he just ends up going more owned than what the ownership projections are, just because he's coming off the best game of his career, and he's also at as expensive as he's been all season.
Yes, and my concern there is that with Kelly Olynyk out, we've seen the starting lineup be Vanderbilt and Kessler. In that first game against Cleveland, they still didn't play that many minutes alongside each other. Last game against Detroit, they did. But prior to that, they had not played alongside each other all season. And Detroit has a front court with Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duren playing alongside each other for a ton of minutes. Cleveland has a front court where you have Mobley playing alongside Jared Allen. Washington has a front court where you have a center, and if it's Porzingis, it's a stretch five. If it's Gafford, you have a center, and you have Kyle Kuzma as the four. Like, I think they're probably going to be more hesitant to go to that double big lineup for as many minutes as they did against Detroit, just because Kyle Kuzma is probably going to torch them. Like, it just makes more sense to me. Like, matchup wise, it just makes more sense to have more minutes where you have Beasley in the lineup and Markkanen at the four, as opposed to a ton of minutes of Kessler alongside Vandy.
Yeah, Beasley's also going to be like a third of the ownership of Vanderbilt, I assume. So I would lean towards Beasley there. We got some more super chats that came in. First from Barry Rodriguez, just got back to NBA and I've been on a $50 winning streak for 3 days in a row. Thanks, guys. Barry, good to see you having some success, and welcome back to the NBA streets. And thank you for watching our shows and supporting the YouTube channel. We really do appreciate it. We have another super chat here, and somebody's bold in here, because we have a question from Malcolm Guest. Thoughts on fading CJ all the way? Well,
as in 0%? Like, if you're like Eric and you play 4 lineups and then tweet about your exposures, then like maybe. But if you're playing 150, like having 0 is batshit crazy.
If you're playing one lineup and you don't have CJ McCollum in it, I don't have an issue with that. It's one of the easier ways to differentiate yourself on a 2-game slate. But yeah, if you're playing any kind of multiple amount of lineups, you want to get exposure to McCollum. It doesn't mean you have to be overweight to him. It doesn't even mean you have to be at the field on him. But 0% of them, if you're playing a bunch of lineups, that is way too risky for me, because I do think that just points per dollar, he's the best play on the slate right now. Yeah.
So like the way that I think about it basically is, and I think we've talked about this before on shows, like when you talk about having, what exposure you have to a player across 150 lineups, in a lot of cases, it's not, like, oh, I really like this player, I dislike this player, I think he's overowned, I think he's underowned. It's more so you're taking a bunch of lineups and you're saying like, okay, the best lineups I can put in this large field tournament, factoring in, projection, ownership, all of that, and then it's kind of just where guys filter out. It's not like I'm going in saying like I want to be underweight on McCollum. Him being such a good point per dollar play, even if I end up underweight, it's very likely that we're talking, 30, 40% of my lineups. It would just be so difficult to imagine him just not being in my lineups.
Yeah, it's somebody who's really hard to get away from. Once again, if you're playing cash games, must play CJ McCollum there. So I would say definitely I'm curious. Oh, never mind. So I thought by the way, Eric is on one in the chat right now, and I saw somebody get muted and I misread it. I thought that Eric got muted in chat somehow, which
I thought that too.
Hilarious. But no, it's Eric muting people who say anything negative about him. Yeah, be careful around Eric.
I mean, mostly he's just yelling at me.
Yeah, Eric just quickly deleting messages, banning people. Oh my God, just left and right. Let's get back to talking about the New Orleans Pelicans. And we've talked about the super chalky CJ McCollum. We've talked about the front court situation. But who are the other players we're looking to get to from New Orleans? Because there's a lot of usage up for grabs with no Zion or Ingram out there.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the boom bust tool, it's just straight green or teal or whatever color that is for like this entire team. Joe Val McCollum obviously pulling a lot of ownership, but it's just mispricing, especially on DraftKings. FanDuel, they're too cheap as well, but 3,400 for Jose Alvarado. This is about a fantasy point per minute guy without Zion or Ingram on the floor. Don't know if he'll start. I don't think he will, but he could. Like Trey Murphy and Herb Jones are flexible enough that, and the Spurs play nothing but wings outside of their center. So you could really have anybody replace Zion in the starting lineup. It doesn't have to be a 4. But if Alvarado starts, the minutes, you would expect the minutes to be there, and he's going to look really good. But even if he comes off the bench, you should get more playing time. And like I said, he's about a fantasy point per minute guy. If he gets 22 to 24 minutes, you're talking about like a 7 to 8x projection right there. And he certainly could play more than that. Same goes for Najee Marshall and Herb Jones. They're not the same point per minute guys, but Marshall at 3,700, about 0.75 DraftKings, 0.87 DraftKings points per minute without Zion or Ingram on the floor. If he starts, you project him for more minutes, but even if he comes off the bench, he's probably playing mid-20s and going to look good. Herb Jones at 4,200. He's about a 0.7 fantasy point per minute guy, but you're likely to get 30 plus minutes from him, and he's cheap. Dyson Daniels, 3,300. He's actually who I think is going to start. Right now, he's projected for 22% ownership while everybody else is higher. If he starts, that ownership's going to come up. But we had seen him starting when Jones and Ingram were both out. And like I said, it being Zion doesn't really have to change anything here. Like the offense is still going to run through McCollum. They can still defend every position no matter who they go with. So my guess is Daniels, but again, it could be Daniels, it could be Alvarado, it could be Marshall, but they're all going to look like very good point per dollar options, whether they're starting or not. You're just going to look a little bit better if you're starting because of the playing time.
Yeah, big thing here to keep an eye on the status of Larry Nance Jr. Is he in? Is he out? You guys will find out more from that from Eric and Ryan on the next show, assuming that Eric has been unbanned from the YouTube channel by then, because it appears Jordan found out how to do it. So Eric temporarily banned from the YouTube channel, but he'll be back in time to host the next show here. Now we've got just a 2-game slate. And so something I want to do is show you guys the new lineup builder that we have over at Stokastic.com. So Jordan, can you pull that up and screen share it with Adam and I, and let's look at some of these lineups. So click on the DraftKings one. You guys could build lineups on DraftKings or FanDuel, and then a tournament, because that's the option we have right now. And let's do balance lineups for today with it being a 2-game slate. So what I figure we would do here, and just so you guys know how this works, this is how quickly you could build lineups using our lineup generator. It's built on our projections and our simulations. And these are lineups that are designed to finish in the top of tournaments based on how we're simulating out slates. And you can build up to 20 lineups here. So, Jordan, could you save a lineup, discard a lineup, just kind of show people how the functionality works on it? And then also, if you guys want access to this to try it out, 3 days for free when you sign up at Stokastic for the first time using the link that we have below in the description box, or you could find in the YouTube chat here. So just save a couple, discard a couple, and then save up to 20. And then Adam and I, we could look at some of the ownership, how it ended up coming out in those lineups at the end. And I'll just be curious to see, based on these lineups, where the ownership ended up being after 20 of them. So something that's cool about this is you could export these to a CSV and then upload them right to DraftKings and then enter them into tournaments right from there. And then also you could see all the players you're exposed to right here. So no surprise, CJ McCollum ended up being the most rostered player. Jordan, is there a way that you can make that bigger? Because I have horrific eyesight. There we go. That helps. It just helps me for being able to talk about it. So over the course of the 20 lineups we built here, McCollum ended up being in 100% of them. Najee Marshall ended up being 100%. We got Valanciunas ended up being in all of them. I'm just curious, is there anything that really catches your eye as you're looking at some of these exposures that popped out, Adam?
Jordan Clarkson seems kind of surprising that he's showing up a lot, maybe just because he is a reasonable contrarian option. Obviously, we haven't talked about Utah yet, but he is pulling 42% ownership. So I guess I'm just surprised by that also. So I guess it makes sense. But like I was kind of surprised that he's showing up so much more than Devin Vassell. But no, I think it all makes sense. Obviously, Porzingis, is a big question mark, and that changes everything potentially.
Yeah. So one thing too that you'll see, actually, it's funny because the Clarkson one's almost identical to what his ownership is in large field tournaments. Yeah. He popped up in 43% of these lineups. And then if you look at his ownership right now, we have a projected for on DraftKings, ended up popping up at basically the exact same number here, the 42%. Something else too is you'll notice that Bradley Beal, we ended up coming in a little bit underweight to him. So Bradley Beal currently projected for 50% ownership on DraftKings. But this is where some of those injury situations kind of come into play because a lot of people may be expecting Bradley Beal to play with Kristaps Porzingis sitting. Porzingis currently listed as questionable, but we're going to talk more about Porzingis in a little bit here when we talk about this Wizards Utah game. Real potential opportunity here to play Porzingis, especially if he's rolled in after the first game locks. I don't think anybody's going to play Porzingis. So I don't know if Porzingis popped up in any of these lineups. Can you scroll down? Oh, there
86%. He's
yeah.
at the top.
I really like that as a play in tournaments today. He is not going to get rostered nearly as much as he should if his status is not known before the start of the first game. So he is somebody that I think is really interesting to play in large field tournaments, especially because a lot of people are going to be building their lineups and just be hesitant to get to Porzingis.
Yeah, and like even if you just look at the boom bust tool for a second, those exposures there kind of reflect what you would want it to do. Right now we have Porzingis projected for 25% ownership, but with like a 50% chance of being optimal. So it's a situation where the optimal percentage reflects basically if he plays, but then the ownership is like cut in half because you're just going to get people that are scared to play him, and then you'll lose their center spots prior to him being ruled in potentially. So like if that's the information you have right now, like 25% ownership and a projection that puts him in the optimal lineup 50% of the time, that's somebody that you want getting jammed into a lot of your lineups.
Yeah. So more information going to come, but a lot of this stuff would change closer to lock just based on players getting ruled in and out. But I wanted to give you guys a little bit of insight on this new tool we have on the site and how it works while we had some of the extra time with it just being a 2-game slate. So we've got the one final game to talk about, the Washington Wizards against the Utah Jazz, but also some Discord questions to get to. First one from Sam Cassell Dance. He wants to know, how much of a priority would Gafford become on DraftKings if Porzingis is out? So that is the next game we're going to talk about when it comes to the Washington Wizards and the injury news that we have from Washington. Porzingis is questionable. Denny Avdija is questionable. And it is also a good way to talk about or kick off our conversation about Washington. But how high of a priority would Gafford be for you, Adam, if there is no Porzingis?
Massive. He got the start without Porzingis last game. He played like 29 minutes. Didn't close. They closed with Taj Gibson over him. Obviously, you would feel better about it if he did close. But the fact that there were even more minutes available there, you do have Rui back today. I assume you're going to get Rui as the backup to Gafford here, and Gibson goes away. Doesn't have to be the case. He could back up Kuzma and you keep Gibson in there. A lot probably also ends up depending on Avdija's status as far as the backup rotation goes. But assuming Gafford's in the starting lineup, he's going to look really good. You don't run into the same sort of issues with him today that you did on that last slate either, where it was a full slate. So like you had a really good option at 5K or 4K, whatever he was in Gafford, but you had a million good centers. And so it was, he goes for 28 DraftKings points, I think it was, which was like 7X, and actively hurt you because there were so many good centers on the slate. You don't have quite that same issue today. You still have good ones. You have Joval, you have the Spurs guys, but it's not anywhere near like the full slate. So like if you were to get a 7X game or a 6X game from Gafford here, it's much, much more likely to help you than on those larger slates.
And one thing that's interesting too about the way this slate is breaking out right now, and I understand why this would be the mentality of a lot of the field, but relative to it being a 2-game slate, people are not rostering Porzingis or Gafford today. And I think whichever one starts at center is going to be a really good option today. Gafford, if he plays, we know that's a really good value option. Porzingis, if he plays, that's a really high upside play. So I want to know, how are you going to approach the start of the slate? Because if we go into the slate with Porzingis still being listed as questionable, would you be doing anything different in your lineups to hold a roster spot? Because I want to play either Porzingis or Gafford. It's just hard to know which one it is I ultimately want to get to.
So the way I'm going to approach it, if I had to guess, I don't think Porzingis plays just because he missed shoot around today. But if we don't have any news, I'm still going to project him to play because I think it's going to be a lot easier to late swap that direction. Like if I have Porzingis in and he gets ruled out, I think it's going to be a lot easier to late swap down to Gafford and then get to more Kuzma, get to more Beal than vice versa. And I'm not worried that I'm just not going to have spots open because I know I'm going to get to a lot of Porzingis if I project him in. I kind of have to think about it more if it were a situation where I'm not going to get to Porzingis and then I'm risking not being able to get to Gafford. But I know I'm going to get to Porzingis. I know I'm going to get the other guys on the Wizards. I'm going to have plenty of room to swap around for this game. So I'm going to project Porzingis in if we don't get news and then late swap around it.
The next question that we have here is from Jets World. If Porzingis is out, would we prefer Walker Kessler or Daniel Gafford? So that
Gafford.
part of it, I am going to say Gafford.
Yeah, it's Gafford for me. Again, assuming that they both start Gafford and Kessler, it's Gafford for me because I think the playing time is just more secure for Gafford. He's also a better fantasy point per minute guy. Not that Kessler's bad, but Gafford's about a little over a fantasy point per minute this year. Kessler, I believe, is about 0.85 DraftKings points per minute. And again, Kessler's actually at 1.09. So Kessler's been a little bit better. I thought he had been a little bit worse. But I think the playing time is more secure for Gafford. Again, partly because of the matchup here and the fact that I think you're likely to see a little bit more playing time from Malik Beasley at the expense of the double big lineups for Utah.
And then the other part of this question, which is also pertinent to this game, Jets World is asking us, who's the bigger priority, Lauri Markkanen or Bradley Beal? I wish I had a more definitive answer for you. Other than that, it depends on the status of Porzingis. If Porzingis plays, I prefer Markkanen. If Porzingis sits, I prefer Beal. But what is your take on that, Adam?
Same. Markkanen this year has been about a 1.2 DraftKings point per minute guy. Beal with Porzingis on the floor has been about 1.1. I think they play similar minutes. So I prefer Markkanen slightly if Porzingis is in. I prefer Beal if Porzingis is out.
XX Cubs fan 23XX. My girlfriend's husband is upset that his sister-in-law has outstayed her welcome. Any advice on how to get her to leave? Yeah, so start charging rent. I think that's a surefire way you could do it. Start charging a rent. I would also recommend that you shit in her toilet and don't flush, because I mean, who wants to stay in an apartment just every time she comes in? And then don't even let her know it's you, though. Just be like, oh, the plumbing doesn't work here, right? Because that's going to be something that would for sure try to prevent her from wanting to stay longer. But these are some of the things too that you guys get with the Discord channel, because it's not just DFS. People ask very important life questions that they don't know how to handle. So I hope that's able to assist you right there, Cubs fan 23. As for Discord, looks like we've got all of the questions answered now. So we've talked about the Porzingis injury scenario, but Deni Avdija is also questionable. What stands out if Avdija doesn't play? Are there any value plays that would pick up steam for you from the Wizards?
Yeah, so that part becomes really difficult to break down because it does partly depend on Porzingis, at least a little bit. But if Avdija is out, I expect that you would get Corey Kispert back in the starting lineup. He's 3,900, not a very good point per minute guy, but certainly would have a lot of playing time available for him if Avdija is out. Will Barton at 4,300 would have an easier path to success as well. You could potentially get some more Jordan Goodwin alongside Monte Morris, whereas last game they just basically Goodwin just backed up Morris. But I think Kispert and Barton would be the two most likely guys to step up without Avdija.
Yeah, Barton has, as you and I have discussed, Barton has largely been a disaster this year, but he has played a little bit better as of late. Now, the bar was so low that he could only go up from there, but it's been less of a disaster in recent games. So if you look at the last 2 weeks now for Will Barton, 26 minutes per game, 25 fantasy points, definitely been a little bit of an uptick there, and the fantasy production has been at least decent. Now, the other guys that we have to talk about on the Wizards, the other pay-up options, Kyle Kuzma, super, super popular option today. So Kuzma currently projected for 55% ownership on DraftKings at $8,700, on FanDuel projected for 66% ownership at $8,300. Of the chalky plays on the slate, if Porzingis does end up being active, it's not to say Kuzma is unplayable, but he's my least favorite of these super chalky guys if Porzingis is to be in.
I still like him though. He's plays so many minutes. If Porzingis and Avdija are both in, you do run the risk of Kuzma losing a few minutes here now that Rui's back. That you could potentially see that 34, 35 minute game from Kuzma as opposed to 37 to 39 that he's been playing. And then he does take a hit if Porzingis is in as well. So I guess I'm with you, but at the same time, I also think Kuzma is a really good play here. 1.08 DraftKings points per minute overall this season without Porzingis on the floor in case Porzingis doesn't play. 1.14 DraftKings points per minute. But again, just playing like 38, 39 minutes in so many games.
Sorry, my dad decided it was a good time to call me right now. He texted me and asked what I was doing. I said I'm on a show, and he says okay, and then calls me. So I don't know. I don't know what he was expecting, but I will call him back in 10 minutes. By the way, Kuzma, it's not to say that I think that he's outright bad or anything like that, but here are the guys who are expensive and really popular on DraftKings, at least as of right now. We've got McCollum, of the players that are projected for over 50% ownership. There's McCollum, Valanciunas, and Kuzma. And then on FanDuel, the players that are projected for the north of 50% ownership as pay up options, it's McCollum, Kuzma, and Markkanen. Just relative to those guys, Kuzma is my least favorite on FanDuel and DraftKings, only if Porzingis plays, though, because I just don't think people are going to be adjusting that much for the Porzingis news.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable take. It is interesting, and it does make me like Kuzma quite a bit more if Porzingis is out too. That they did mostly stagger him and Beal last game. Not entirely. You had, I don't know, like a minute where neither of them were on the floor. But other than that, if Beal wasn't out there, Kuzma was, which is certainly good for his production as well. A 30% usage rate overall without Porzingis on the floor this year, about 27% when Beal is on and Porzingis is off. So getting those minutes where neither is on is really nice.
Richie G, our guy Richie, wants to know if we heard anything about a Jakob Poeltl minutes restriction. He's going to have one. I haven't seen a specific number though. Have you, Adam?
No, I had seen 20 that first game. I'm guessing like 26 is reasonable. Like, it wouldn't shock me if he played 28. It wouldn't shock me if he played 24. So I'm probably just going 26, 22 between him and Collins.
The problem with teams like the Spurs that are clearly not good and just are not being competitive this time of year is that there isn't a lot of incentive for them to play Jakob Poeltl a ton of minutes. And then point two, reporters don't give a shit enough to ask Greg Popovich how many minutes Jakob Poeltl is going to play because it's just so irrelevant to everybody other than us.
I also don't blame them. Like, even if they were competitive, I would not want to be the one asking Greg Popovich how many minutes Poeltl's. They asked him, what was it, 2 weeks ago, about Devin Vassell being out like an hour before the game, and Pop didn't even know he was out.
Yeah. Do you think, by the way, is that a bit or does he actually not know?
My guess is that he didn't care. Like, he hadn't talked to the trainers and was just like, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Like, my guess was just that, like, if Vassell is on the bench, Vassell is going to start. And if Vassell's still in the locker room, then he'll figure out Vassell's not playing.
Anything else you want to talk about from the Wizards before we move over to the Jazz?
No.
All right. So for the Jazz, the injury news we've heard, Kelly Olynyk is officially out, and then Colin Sexton is questionable. So starting with Olynyk not being active, who are the big men that are gaining the most that you want to play in DFS based on Olynyk not being out there?
So assuming they stick with the same starting lineup, Vanderbilt and Kessler are both still interesting. You know, I know, you know, when they came up previously, I kind of was hesitant to go to either guy, but looking at their ownership, like 18% coming to Vanderbilt, 10% coming to Kessler, there is still a chance that Utah just plays this bigger lineup and both of these guys benefit. You know, last game you got 27 minutes from Kessler. The game before that, or the same game, you got 32 from Vanderbilt. I've said it a few times. I don't think you get as many minutes alongside each other as they did last game, but certainly wouldn't be the first time that I'm wrong. And if I am wrong, that ownership is really low on both guys. But the thing that's really interesting is that not only is it low on those two, you're only getting 11% going to Malik Beasley. Somebody from this group is going to play and really benefit from Kelly Olynyk being out because those minutes are going to some combination of those guys. You're basically going to get a closing lineup here where you have Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, Lauri Markkanen, at least one of Kessler Vanderbilt, and then either the other one of Kessler Vanderbilt or Malik Beasley. Outside of foul trouble, injuries, blowouts, like that is the closing lineup. So the fact that none of these guys is getting ownership is really interesting in tournaments because it's a situation where its ownership is basically reflecting median projections, and there are guys that project better, but there's a lot of volatility here and in the playing time for these guys. So it actually makes that trio really interesting for me in tournaments. And I kind of don't care which ones I get. Like, Beasley's easy to fit into lineups because he's shooting guard, small forward. Vanderbilt, you know, coming off of a massive game and a good point per minute guy. And then Kessler, also a good point per minute guy with the least flexibility. So at their respective ownership, I think all three are interesting, even though I'm not really confident in how this rotation is going to look.
Yeah, I think of the the biggest boom bust option is going to be Jared Vanderbilt. He's projected for, relative to a 2-game slate, he's projected for 18% ownership on DraftKings, and on FanDuel he's projected for 20%. So it's not all that much, but I do tend to think that recency bias is going to boost that up. Just played a bunch of minutes with Kelly Olynyk out, had his best game of the season. It's a 2-game slate. I think a lot of people are going to be clicking that button. But yeah, a lot of uncertainty there. I don't disagree with anything you said. I've got a couple of super chats that came in right now. First from Tyler McKinney, new to NBA. How much total ownership is too chalky, or does that even matter whether it's a 2-game slate or a 10-game slate? Thanks. Yeah, 2-game slate versus 10-game slate is going to make a massive difference because for today, a lot of the best plays are like CJ McCollum is 80% on DraftKings and FanDuel. You have to consider the total ownership number of your lineups totally different based on the size of the slate. But another thing too is there could be a slate where somebody could be 60% owned and you think they should be 80% owned. Somebody could be 60% new and you think they should be 20% owned. So it's really hard to say that there's one ownership number that your lineup should be. It's going to vary slate to slate.
Yeah, I mean, I think the better way to look at it is kind of comparing your lineups to each other, whether you're doing that by projection and ownership or, boom score and ownership or however you want to do it. It's just going to be better than using some sort of like arbitrary ownership number because like you said, there are some times where there's a 60% owned guy and he should be 80%. There's other times where there's, a 20% owned guy and he should be 10. So using, some sort of like, well, I don't want to build a lineup that has X number of players above 10% or that has total ownership above 200, like you're just going to run into mistakes there. You're going to be better off saying like, okay, like I have these 4 lineups I like. They, there's one that projects 3 points worse than the other 3, but ownership is 40 points lower. Like clearly that's going to be the one you want to play if you're only playing one in a tournament. That's going to give you a better way to kind of balance it out and figure out what you want to do.
Next question we have is from the Claw 28. Is Hachimura a good play? Getting Wiseman vibes. It's hard for me to say that he's somebody I'm going to prioritize on this slate. The Claw, if you're only playing, like one lineup here, which if I'm not mistaken, I think that is what you typically do. Rui's not somebody to be in that lineup for me. He's relying on both Porzingis and Avdia being out. And then in addition to that, he's not played in over a month. So I just can't imagine he's going to play a ton of minutes. If you're somebody who's playing 1, 3, 5 lineups, Hachimura would not be in those lineups for me.
I mean, I'm playing 150 and I wouldn't be surprised at all if I don't have Rui. Like he's a 0.87 DraftKings point per minute guy for the season. If he had just been playing this whole time and then you got like Porzingis ruled out and Avdia ruled out, it'd be like, cool, we're going to get like 26, 28 minutes from Rui. But my expectation here is that, and I haven't seen this, officially, but I would just be very surprised if it's not the case. I'm expecting you're getting like 18, 20 minutes from Rui, kind of one way or the other, because even if you rule those guys out, it's not like Washington's in this situation where like they're super shorthanded or something. You're just going to throw minutes to Anthony Gill and Taj Gibson once you get to the point that you don't want to play Rui more. So I don't think it's similar to Wiseman because 1, Wiseman's a better point per minute guy. And 2, Wiseman was in a position where Golden State had no reason not to want to just get him a bunch of minutes in a game where they were resting a bunch of guys and getting their asses kicked. He played 11 minutes in the first half and then just got a bunch of garbage time. It's just a different situation with Rui.
Next super chat we have here is from Eric Adkisson. Is Marshall a good play with Zion out, or is Jones the key? I think both of them are really good plays.
Yeah, I think they're both good plays. I think I prefer Marshall. Don't know if Marshall will start. If Marshall starts, I certainly prefer him, but he's about a 0.87 DraftKings point per minute guy. Jones is about 0.7. You're probably going to get a few more minutes from Jones, especially if Marshall comes off the bench, but Marshall's also a little bit cheaper. I think they're both certainly playable, but I think I go to Marshall first.
And then just getting back to Utah before we hand this over to the live before lock guys, any other priorities for you from the Utah Jazz that we haven't mentioned?
So, I mean, we kind of alluded to Markkanen previously, but I really like Markkanen here. Should play, mid 30s in minutes. He's averaged about 1.2 DraftKings points per minute in the games he's played with Conley. One thing that's really interesting to me, so I think Mike Conley is a reasonable value at, still a pretty cheap price tag. He's coming in at 5,300 on DraftKings. He's getting 31% ownership. I don't like Monte Morris today, but I also have no idea why Mike Conley is getting 3 to 4 times the ownership of Monte Morris. Obviously, if guys are out for Washington, that looks even better for Morris from a playing time standpoint. But you're typically going to get 28 to 30 minutes from Morris. Last game, he played 36. He's a 0.84 fantasy point per minute guy this year. Nothing exciting there. Again, I don't really like playing him. But Mike Conley, 0.9 DraftKings points per minute, should give you around 30 minutes. I don't think he's very different from Monte Morris. They're both guys that I don't really like getting to. Low usage, relatively high assist percentage guys. But they're cheap enough where they make some sense from a point per dollar standpoint, but I don't think that Conley should be this much more popular than Monte Morris.
All right, we got a couple of more super chats here, and then we're going to hand it over to the Live Before Lock guys. If you guys haven't done it yet, do us a favor, like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. First, the Claw 28. Is it a bad idea to fade Vassell? And do you like Murphy? If you're playing one lineup, I don't think you have to play Vassell. I don't have an issue with him not being in it. And yes, I like Trey Murphy.
Yeah, same answer to both. Vassell's fine. Like it's again, it kind of depends what you mean fade. Like if you're playing one lineup, then I don't think there's normally just never going to be a player that like you have to have. If you are playing 150 and you mean fade is in 0, then yeah, that's probably crazy. But if you mean it is in underweight, then that's perfectly fine. And yeah, I like Trey Murphy as well.
All right. And then King fucking Dash. Happy holidays, fellas. Greg and Adam, give your top 5 FanDuel cash plays if you were to build one lineup, and the top 2 of the plays must be value options. All right. So I will handle this question right here. And I guess it also depends what you're considering a value play on this slate on FanDuel, because it's not like you need a punt with anybody. Like I think Najee Marshall is the best value play we have on FanDuel. He's $4,600. And I would say Trey Murphy, another guy, 5,200, that makes a whole lot of sense in cash games as well. 5,246. Like you don't have to play anybody who's $3,800 for FanDuel cash. In fact, I would advise you don't play any of those guys FanDuel cash. But I think the 2 best value guys for cheap are Trey Murphy and Najee Marshall in cash games. Trey Jones also, if you consider him value being in the mix. But then McCollum, Kuzma, Markin, and Valanciunas, you want to play those guys in cash games on FanDuel as well. That is going to do it for us. We went overtime on a 2-game slate. Look at us. If you guys haven't done it yet, one more time, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and stick around because Live Before Lock is next.
Yo, it's that time of week again, and it's a special time of week. It's the holiday season. We got Christmas upon us. Hanukkah's happening right now, and that means we're giving some stuff out, like some Stokastic Plus Platinum memberships, putting people up in the Hall of Fame here, and all you got to do to get involved is download the Stokastic profile picture at stokastic.com/avatar and tweet your wins at StokasticHOF on Twitter. You want to get a free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum? You want to get inducted into the Hall of Fame? That's how we do it. Finish top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more, and boom, you're in. Let's get started on what we've got going for this week. Some big winners, starting it off with Clem822, Michael P. Clement, to be exact. Thank you, guys. Best tools in the industry. Special thanks to Player Q DFS and Draftaholic. Look at that. Top tying himself with $4,700 on each of them. Huge win for Michael. Next up, we're talking Trafalgar Law. It's easier to say Louis with the $15,000 win. One shot hit. Thank you to Josh and Eric for the Kessler pick and all the advice from everybody else. LFG, huge win, Louis. Congratulations with solo shot, just straight single bullets across the board. And D Fick with a $2,000 win. Thank you, Matt Kajeski and Stokastic, for my best college finish to date. Oh, and we got D Fick again. Always nice to solo bing a large field showdown. Player Q DFS has mapped out how to do it pretty nicely. He 100% has. Another $1,000 win for D-Fit. Our boy News Guy, you've seen him in chat. You've seen him in Discord. Man's working every hour of the day. Shout out to Stokastic projected stats page. Turning a $10 bet into $466 using all of our projected props over there with OddsShopper and Stokastic. Keith Roberts. When that Russell Gage garbage time touchdown brings Christmas a week early, shout out to the whole Stokastic crew for the tools and daily knowledge. Stop throwing your money away and go check them out. Damn right, Keith. $5,000 win. Merry Christmas, brother. And Jay Lusty with a $4,000 win. He's a simple man. At Stokastic is all he has to say. But we got $4,000 there. A little NBA action for Jay Lusty. And we're going to go with how do we do this one? Darek Barbour, I got one. Thanks. $1,000 in the $15,000 single back 3 entry. Congratulations, man. Next up, we got Andrew St. Clair. Yeah, buddy. $2,500. AT St. Clair over there on FanDuel with an NFL when we had a nice Sunday, it looks like. And then you got, oh, this is the big one. S. Schaefer. Stokastic is fantastic. took first and 6. Thanks for providing the tools and the commentary to bring home the big win. Props to Greg Ehrenberg and Gundacker for the pre-slate show. Pre-lock breakdowns are essential to my process. Chalk up another one for the Stokastic Hall of Fame. $100,000 win, 6 figures for Schaefer. Huge win, man. Congratulations. Remember, download the Stokastic avatar at stokastic.com/avatar. Tweet your wins at Stokastic Hall of Fame and win a free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum. Get inducted into the Hall of Fame right here and let us do the bragging for you.
Vine Klein. Honestly, that was money.
Yeah, I know.
How do we not put that together yet?
I just did.
Vine Klein. What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the NBA Live Before Lock show presented by BetMGM. I'm Eric Lindquist. We're excited to talk through this 2-gamer, and I do mean excited because things are happening. Hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell, because the Slate Starter podcast, once upon a time, this fabled podcast that used to exist with myself and my buddy Rayen over there, Rayen Patnaik. Rinpack is who you know him as on the Twitters, on everywhere else. I totally know how to say his last name. I'm fantastic, and I'm a great friend like that. Massive news that just dropped, but first, how you doing, my dude?
Doing well. Excited to do another Live Before Lock for this 2-game slate. Should be a ton of fun. And obviously, producer Red Vine Klein's in the house on the 1s and 2s, so it's going to be a good night.
Man, oh God, not Eric. Well, God, not Rob. You little avatar-less little dinkhead. I don't know what to say. Jordan Klein, Red Vine Klein. Excited to have him producing here, kicking at side saddle. I will say, it was a little strange being courtside at the Clippers game without you last night. I missed you, Boo. I missed you. Did you miss me? You missed me. Yeah. I love you long time. Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy holidays. All of the nice things. But holy shit, we have no Kristaps Porzingis. We have no Deni Avdija. We're going to comb through all of the reasons that this matters. One, you're playing NBA DFS. I assume you know that matters. And two, we got one of the top players in the entire land, in all of the world over here, giving you guys the analysis live as he's making lineups, as he's reacting to this news. So I'll just say, Rayen, Daniel Gafford looks like an okay play today.
Yeah, yet again, Dan Gafford does look like a solid option to go to, and they're going to need his minutes. I believe last game, there was a stretch where he didn't close the game. So that's obviously on the table. That could certainly happen again. But in the Utah matchup, where it's the guys like Vanderbilt, Walker Kessler on the other side of things, I think Taj Gibson ended up closing the game last game. Sure
did.
So just keep in mind, I know Gafford looks like a solid option. His price has definitely gone up, but there are pathways where he doesn't play the full allocated 30-plus minutes. But on a 2-game slate, you're going to have to consider Dan Gafford, center-only option. Looks like another strong play yet again tonight.
Yeah, he's a great play. I don't know what to say. He played 29 minutes. I will say his box score, I mean, that Phoenix game, he should have gone for a lot more than that. Such a weird game that was. Obviously, there was no zinger in that one either. You're seeing what those minutes can be so long as he shows up in the starting lineup. I think there's no reason not to assume, coming off of a start last game, that he ends up being there. It is a 2-game slate, though, and we've disregarded Taj Gibson on these bigger slates. But do you have any Taj Gibson interest, considering he did play 19 minutes last time out?
Goddamn.
I know.
These are some hard-hitting questions, I'll tell you that. But look, it's Taj Gibson. There aren't that many super studs on this slate. Who's the most expensive guy on this slate that you're looking to jam in? It seems like you're going to really hope for Taj Gibson to put up 20-plus fantasy points for you to really get there to consider him a strong center option. That's certainly on the table, but I don't want to get that cute. I don't think I need to go to Taj Gibson. I'll have to see what lineups look like with him in. But it doesn't seem that necessary. Look, the most expensive guy on the slate across the board might be Kuzma, if I'm not mistaken, which is crazy. Kyle Kuzma is the most expensive player on a slate in 2022. Here we are, but that's something to keep an eye on, or it's marketing on some sites, but I don't think it's necessary. I think you can go balanced across the board, take advantage of some nice value options on both Washington and New Orleans. and just go with that. I don't think it's all that necessary to go to Taj, in my opinion. I think there are better options than him. We'll see what the minutes look like. Hachimura is expected to return. He can certainly chew up some front court minutes. Not sure how many minutes Hachimura gets at the 5, but there's a chance he could get some of those minutes as well. It's a situation where I don't really want to go to Taj. And if he burns me, it's a Taj Gibson slate. I'm okay with that.
I think I'm with you, but I got to ask these questions, hard-hitting questions, as you put it. I think the major other ramification of this news, we've done a million shows together. We kind of know how each other goes about building lineups, and I can kind of tell you the contrarian options before the slate even starts that you might be interested in, but I had to at least throw Taj out. I think the reason he doesn't become necessary for this slate is because Kyle Kuzma, 8,700, Lauri Markkanen, 8,300, 8,100. There is no stud to pay up for, really. There's nobody 9K and above on DraftKings. On FanDuel, now you don't have any of those pieces either, but with no Zion, no Zinger, it definitely becomes condensed in this mid-range kind of by default. It's difficult when you play Gafford in the middle of 2 or 3 of those studs that you're not just running into a lot of the same builds. You don't have to play a Taj Gibson piece. It's like the opportunity cost of just using the lineup spot up. I think, I don't know. Do you have Rui Hachimura interest? I will say first game back, I think it's hard for me to project him over 22 minutes, really. That was something I talked about on the strategy show this morning with Adam, but at 4,100, if I'm going to have lineups where I'm just even rationally thinking trying to fade Gafford, which is something I know you'll probably try to find paths to do in some kind of capacity, is Rui interesting to you?
Yeah, certainly Rui. I'm willing to take some chances on a 2-game slate. More than anything, ownership matters a lot, obviously, in DFS, but in the 2-game slate, it's amplified on a whole nother level, right? We can find bits and pieces. You can play a ton of chalk, and you can have that one guy who's sub 5% owned surrounded by chalk, and it could work out on the 2-game slate, and Hachimura can be him. But keep in mind, he's coming back from an extended absence. I don't expect full minutes whatsoever. It's just a 2-game slate where ownership I expect to be quite low, and I'm okay taking some chances on a guy like Hachimura tonight. That's the one reason I'm willing to take some chances, because I think that ownership is going to be quite low.
Yeah, I think that you have to do that kind of stuff if you're a tournament player, and you're the best there is. So wanted to ask you, happy to have my guy sit inside saddle me for this one. But we go position by position here on the Live Before Lock show. That news dropped just as we were coming in. I know that there are some super chats here as well. Hopefully Jordan Klein is doing his job and sending them to me. Look at that. He was Red Vine Klein. No, he didn't. Never mind. You didn't send me any super chats. You said there were super chats. Oh, nobody cares about us? Oh, that's sad. All right. Well, we continue on position by position to the guard spot, my friend. Let's start with Bradley Beal, because he's the most expensive guard you have on the slate. He's at 50%. I could see that number starting to trend up a little bit. How are we feeling? Well, he's not the most popular guy, but he is the most expensive. How do you feel about Bradley Beal, absent Kristaps Porzingis, and now also absent Deni Avdija?
I love Bradley Beal. Look, he's been playing north of 30 minutes coming back from this injury. This is some pre-Porzingis Bradley Beal, in my opinion. We're going to expect a lot of shot attempts, and there was a point where Brad Beal was 10K. In a similar spot in this similar like roster construction for this Wizards team. I love going right back to Brad Beal. No issues whatsoever. Going to be one of my higher owned plays on the slate. I think rightfully so. He looks fantastic. He's my favorite Wizard to go to, if not one of my favorite plays on the slate outright. He looks amazing in my opinion. I think hopefully he comes in a bit under owned. I really hope Brad Beal's a must have tonight by the end of the night. I think he looks pretty outstanding. Tough to move off of him. I mean, I think a lot of lineups are going to start with him. He's going to be heavily owned, but rightfully so. It seems unnecessary to get off of Brad Beal with all the situations in play for this 2-game slate right now.
Yeah, it is really difficult to get away from Bradley Beal tonight. But then CJ McCollum coming in with more ownership, and we spent a long time digging into CJ McCollum and some of his mid-range inefficiencies. That's what you can do on a 2-game slate. You can kind of go a little bit more deep diving. Don't have to sit on the surface, talk about chalky plays or certain situations. You don't always have news coming in, or you don't always have news incoming the entire time like we do on a regular 7-game slate, 10-game slate, 14-game slate we have tomorrow. Thank God I've already started working on that for tomorrow. But CJ McCollum, 7,500, no Zion, no Ingram. How are we feeling about him there at the point guard position?
another spot where another guard who looks great and underpriced for the role tonight. He looks fantastic. And he should be up there in terms of high ownership. I expect for this game, as long as it stays close, it should be mid 30s minutes. Look, the last couple of games, he's gone 41, 36, and 42 minutes in all straight losses. This New Orleans team has lost 4 in a row. So it's going to be on the backs of CJ McCollum. Look, 24, 19, 25 shot attempts. You're going to love CJ McCollum across the board on all the 3 sites, that being Yahoo, FanDuel, and DraftKings. Just one of those guys who, on this weird 2-game slate, he's in the realm to be one of the highest scoring players. And there's enough value in balanced bills to get him in there. And it makes a lot of sense. And it's awesome. I think CJ McCollum looks like an outstanding play. No Zion Williamson usage. It should be going to him. It should be going to Joe Val. It should be going to Trey Murphy. We'll touch on those guys later, but McCollum and Beal, outstanding guard position options tonight, by far in their own tier, in my opinion.
Yeah, they are kind of unavoidable. I'm only playing a handful of lineups, which is kind of playing right into Adam's joke. What a jerk. Literally, oh, you make 4 lineups in EV, and you want to shut up. Just shut up, Adam. I love you, but you're also a dickhole. CJ McCollum, yeah, Bradley Beal. I've got to record NBA thing tonight in 14 games. I can't even process trying to figure out what I'm going to do if, well, there's not going to be a late swap. If that starting lineup comes out soon enough, I should be okay. But the rest of the board is getting wild here, my friend, because there is Trey Murphy, Jordan Clarkson, Devin Vassell. I like one of them more than I like the other ones. We'll see who ends up being that starter here from the Pelicans side, and that is going to dictate what I do with Jose Alvarado, that's for sure. But between Clarkson and Vassell there at 6,900 and 7,400, do you have a preference between the two right now?
I'm going to go with Jordan Clarkson.
Interesting. Okay, give me the case.
Yeah, it's difficult. We just also got some important news, which will matter later on. Larry Nance, I believe, was just ruled inactive. It's something to keep an eye on going forward. But
alrighty,
that's going to definitely change some things up, as minutes will definitely open up in the front court, and already a shorthanded front court team. So take an eye on that. But yeah, I'm going to go with Jordan Clarkson. Trey Jones has been rock solid. I know that there is no Keldon Johnson there. You're really hoping for Trey Jones to shoot very efficient. I like that he's been shooting double-digit shot attempts for the last 4 or 5 games. It's kind of an ownership situation play for me. I like Clarkson. I like the Wizards game environment. I think Clarkson has a higher upside than Trey Jones. I'm curious. I think you probably agree with me there, right? Unless you think Trey Jones has a higher upside tonight.
No, I don't.
Okay, yeah, I'm just shooting for the upside on 2 games.
This is where I think I get myself in trouble on 2 gamers once in a while, because, I mean, upside is relative, right? There's only so many options, and raw points really, really matter at a certain point. And I'm going to look at the projection, and I'm going to see a massive difference. 15% difference in terms of ownership between the two right now, between Clarkson and Trey Jones, and inside of a 3-point projection. I don't know. Part of me feels as though you kind of go to the default to the boom bust tool. And we have a lot to update. We just got the Larry Nance news, but as it stands right now, it was slight negative leverage on Trey Jones here, and Jordan Clarkson, slight negative leverage there. Maybe it's just kind of a pick'em situation considering the lower ownership on Trey Jones, but I don't know if they're going to both be just slightly negatively leveraged. Maybe I just click on Trey Jones instead. I don't have a strong preference, and so I kind of default to the ownership. Do you kind of follow me there?
Yeah, no, that makes sense there. And look, we have 2 teams that are kind of shorthanded, and the Spurs team is fully healthy. I might actually no Keldon Johnson, which is, I feel like these guys are priced correctly for no Keldon Johnson so far. It's kind of been an interesting rotation. Obviously, Jakob Poeltl's been playing weird minutes of late, limited minutes, where I'm just looking for like high usage players missing, and that's Zion there. There's Porzingis in the other game. I know Utah's fully healthy, so maybe you're talking to me a little bit more Trey Jones than I thought, but I'm going to see how this progresses in the next 10, 15 minutes if we get any other news.
Yeah, I think part of the reason that Clarkson probably ends up higher owned now too, think about it this way. There's just unlimited money to spend, and so people are going to default to the guy $400 more. Like that's something that definitely happens on 2-game slates, especially 2-game slates that are featured slates where everybody's playing them. It's the featured contest. Like taking Clarkson and just going to Trey Jones and leaving those $400 of salary on the table, I think is going to make you a lot more different than you think it will on a 2-game slate.
No, that's a great point there. And you feel free to leave some money on this slate. There are a lot of ways you can do so. And you can leave a decent amount of money, more than usual, on a 2-game slate. But keep in mind, you don't need to get too crazy. I don't think you need to sacrifice that much of a raw projection. But the way these teams are missing guys and the way like salary and roster construction works out, I have some lineups that are leaving a little bit more money than usual.
Yeah, I will say, like, for me, Rui Hachimura probably comes out of play with some of the news that we just got, because they said you don't have to leave that much raw projection, but there are going to be a lot of pieces that we're going to be projecting at the forward spots much, much better than a Rui or something of that nature now. Larry Nance officially out. We'll get to that at the forward spot, but I do want to round out guard. I want to stay on track in that direction. Are there any punts or anybody? I mean, anybody sub 6K is kind of considered a punt. Mike Conley, I know, is a guy that you've had interest in the past, as we've talked about players specifically with upside that doesn't always seem realized all the time. Mike Conley doesn't seem like a very flashy option, especially on a slate like this, but I think you'd be surprised by some of his game logs where he can put up the 40, 45 to just outduel, somebody around that salary. There's really nobody around 5,300 other than Colin Sexton, and I don't love the minutes. Anybody there, sub 6K that you have a lot of interest in at the guard spot?
Not really. I mean, like, I like Beal and what's his name? I like Beal and McCollum so much that the other guys are just kind of falling under the rug. It's a 2-game slate. And some of these guys, can an Alvarado get pesky off the bench? And maybe not really. Conley's fine to go to. I just don't like his minutes. He doesn't play that many minutes like that consistently above 30 minutes since coming back from injury. That alone limits that upside. He's not the high usage guy. You're never going to really see Conley take double-digit shot attempts. You're hoping for high assists, potential steals, like peripheral stats. This is Mike Conley's kind of dusty. It is what it is. And Mike Conley of Memphis was fantastic. He just didn't really work out in Utah. And we'll see what happens with the trade deadline coming up. But this is just I'm not that excited to go to Conley. Yeah, it's a 2-game slate. You can make an argument just because maybe he finds a way to get there in a Washington matchup. But I'm willing to just spend up for guys like Beal and McCollum. It just seems more logical. Even the ownership's there. I just got to find a way to get above that projected ownership.
Chuck Deuces 911. What happened to Herbert Jones' defensive acumen? His D rate is baseline at best this year. You're fucking wrong. It is so good. He's an 85th percentile defender. What are you talking about? I'm looking at dunks and threes. By any metric, Herbert Jones is still a phenomenal defender. Don't just say stuff that isn't true. Like, just very obviously not true. Look at it. Any baseline. Jordan Klein, don't you agree? Herbert Jones, The Glove, Part 2, the sequel. He doesn't care. He's not even listening to me. He's just like, why are you getting upset? I just felt like it. Don't say stuff that's just blatantly not true.
You know what doesn't upset Jordan, right?
What?
Ish Wainwright.
Ish Wainwright, right?
Do you like that putback slam, Jordan?
Vine Klein. My dude. It was so weird and lonely being there without you. I needed my comfy little pillow with a shoulder to lean on. Oh, buddy. Guys, BetMGM. Oh, go ahead.
Nah, did you know Ish Wainwright cracked the top 5 NBA top plays, and it was all because of Red Vine Klein?
Yeah, he tried to crack into my friend Addison's DMs. That didn't happen either. But we got BetMGM, y'all. Sign up in the video description box below. That is where you want to be, and why? Multiple reasons. One, you want exposure to every single sports book there is, so you can shop for the best lines. We have OddsShopper, our partner company. It's called OddsShopper for a reason. We want you to shop for the best lines. God damn it, I hate this photo so damn much. Ryan, don't laugh. Don't laugh. It's not funny, okay? This is serious business. We're trying to get the people money. You shop for the best lines. DraftKings, FanDuel, Yahoo. Well, not Yahoo. They work with BetMGM. There you go. But DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, Caesars, all of these sports books, you want to be signed up. You want to take advantage of all of these offers that they have going. And this one is ridiculous for multiple reasons. One, you're going to get a $25 free bet when you put this $1,000 or, $10. You just deposit $10 or more. You get up a risk-free bet up to $1,000. And then you get a $25 free bet in addition to it. Hard to beat that offer. Hard to beat it, period, in anywhere in the industry, because you're going to get 2 months of Stokastic Plus as well. We're talking the best DFS tools and content in the entire space. Everything we have here behind the paywall will be yours for 2 months when you sign up for it. So go to the video description box below, click on the link to BetMGM. You deposit $10 or more, you bet anything you want, $10 or more. period. You're going to get a $25 free bet and 2 months of Stokastic. So great offer. Thank you to BetMGM. And God, I hate this picture so much. What am I supposed to do? It's so tilting. Every time I see it, it's just jarring to look at. Whatever. I'm prettier than
You just got to order another photo shoot.
Just going to order it up. I think you just go onto the dark webs out in LA and you just say, hey, I want to get some photos taken. Yeah, we'll be ready to rock. What, Jordan Klein? Don't give me looks like that. You know what I'm talking about. It's LA.
Jordan Klein's the type of guy who would call the paparazzi on himself. So I don't know why he's making that face.
Oh, from the top rope, astray. Dude, bro, chill life is in effect. Oh, I needed that. I needed that for morale because I've been getting bombarded. I've been getting blasted. I've been up since 5:30 a.m. Yeah, filling in for Josh doing strategy show. Love Josh. Make sure you guys give him some love. But just saying, it's been a long day, and I am grinding for you. I'm putting in the work, and then you come and wreck his life. That made everything better. I miss you so much for Impact. But to the forward position, and I want to start with this news. Larry Nance, now officially out. I think we can all agree. You look at what happened to Jonas Valanciunas last game. Not saying he's going to put up a bajillion fantasy points again, but he is definitely going to project out at center as the best play on the slate in terms of raw projection. There's no doubt there. But what happens to the rest of these New Orleans Pelicans pieces absent Larry Nance?
Yeah, it's a situation. They're also missing Zion, who's in health and protocols, which is another huge piece. As gross as this might sound, it might be a wonky second unit rotation. There's going to be guys like Najee Marshall, Dyson Daniels, obviously coming off the bench. It wouldn't shock me if we get a couple rotational run of Jackson Hayes cracking that rotation, or Willie Hernan Gomez going to play some extended run as well. There was times last year where Willie Green did play Jackson Hayes at the 4 with Valanciunas at times when Zion was out. So that's certainly on the table, just turning back the clock a little bit. Jackson Hayes is clearly in the doghouse this season as he's not playing much at all. But I'm just going to start with McCollum and Valanciunas. I like them a lot. I prefer Trey Murphy to Herb Jones. More of a ceiling, in my opinion, than Herb. I might even prefer Najee Marshall compared to Herb Jones. And then take some chances on your Dyson Daniels, your Hernan Gomez, maybe your Alvarados afterwards. But it's a situation where with no Nance, you got to look at the front court. You feel like Valanciunas' minutes are a bit more secure. And look, when this guy gets minutes, he's an outstanding fantasy producer. It's just sometimes he doesn't get that many minutes, and they don't like playing him and Zion together much. So he's been the casualty of that. And I think Valanciunas looks like an outstanding starting point tonight. Center only. He honestly on this slate could be the highest scoring center by 20, 25 points.
Yeah. Very much so. Very, very live to be a thing. Oh, it's going to be difficult to get away from any Jonas Valanciunas. It's going to be hard to get away from any CJ McCollum. I think those are kind of like lockstep. Whoever the fifth starter is for the Pelicans, Najee Marshall, kind of the consensus pick right now. I think that makes a lot of sense. Jose Alvarado could. It's been something that's been done in the past. In spots like this, I don't know what to say. I think maybe they're waiting for the Spurs lineup because if Romeo Langford starts, you could look at him playing next to Jose Alvarado pretty easily in that starting lineup as well. We'll see how it all pans out here. We've got, half an hour? We'll know that news. We will make sure that we break it all down. But let's go up to the top of the forward position here where Kyle Kuzma sits on a pedestal, 8,700, all the dudes in all the land. Well, specifically Kristaps Porzingis out as well, but he is 8,700. He is really the only pay-up option you have on this slate, and he's pulling massive ownership as a result. How do you feel about Kuz tonight in Utah?
You got to like Kuz yet again. Both Beal and him should combine for 40 shots at the minimum, and he looks fantastic. Look, he shot pretty efficient, 10 of 19 from Kuz, 37, 40 minutes. Look, you're going to expect high 30s minutes from a guy like Kuzma. Yeah, one of the higher price guys on the slate. There's enough value to get him in. He looks great. Tough not to like Kuz. But I prefer Beal to Kuzma pretty much straight up at the way things stand right now. But they are priced similar, the same on Yahoo, honestly, but they look great. I mean, just targeting these guys seems the way to go. It doesn't seem that necessary to get off Kuz if you think for some ownership reasons, I like going back to Kuz. I know this is a lot of sticker shock, but tough to turn down that raw usage he's getting.
It's so weird to talk about it from like a positional element because I think the chalk is so good. Like you look at CJ McCollum at point guard, I think he's the best play. Jonas Valanciunas, you look at center, he's the best play. Kyle Kuzma, power forward only, I think he's the best play at power forward. If you had to leave one of those three out, McCollum, Valanciunas, and Kuzma out of one lineup, which of the three would you omit?
Say the last part again.
Yeah, so CJ McCollum is by far the most popular play on the slate at point guard, 7,500. Jonas Valanciunas, center only. Kyle Kuzma, power forward only on DraftKings. If you had to omit one of the three out of a lineup, if you're like hand building out one lineup for the people at home, who would you omit?
Kuz.
I'm making you do it.
Kuz.
Okay, that's kind of what my thing is with Kyle Kuzma. I think I'm completely on board with it. He's only pulling, 3% less than J-Val? I just think J-Val is unavoidable good chalk. I think CJ McCollum is unavoidable good chalk. Kyle Kuzma at 8,700, I think there's paths to getting away from it at 70%.
Yeah, we'll see if they throw Jared Vanderbilt, who I consider a decent defender, at him. But we'll see how that works out for Kuz. But it's just so hard to ignore the shot attempts that he's going to get. So, yeah, I think for the sake of the question, it's going to be Kuz, but there's so many great lineups that you can build with all of those guys in.
I know. I'm just trying to I'm trying to leave no stone unturned on a 2-gamer, trying to help the people think about their lineups and how it's all going to fit together. Bradley Beal there, shooting guard. I guess I could have put him into the question, but I took the three guys pulling the most ownership, and I think Kyle Kuzma, if I'm hand building out a lineup, he'd be the guy that I omit the most. And I've been very, very high on Kuzma, more than the field has been on the last couple slates, but this has more to do with positionality. And in the interest of trying to get different, I think Kyle Kuzma probably going to be a guy I get away from in at least one of I now have 10 lineups, but as I'm building out a couple here on the show, but he's a guy that I'm just much, much lower on, just 2 of the 10. So best of luck to everybody there. Lauri Markkanen at 8,300, kind of a pivot that I will say, I think his ownership probably comes down in the absence of the Nance news, because you do get pretty solidified minutes for Najee Marshall if he is in that starting lineup. Trey Murphy, Herbert Jones, all of those guys, cheap forwards that are going to project out for boatload of fantasy points. How does Lauri Markkanen fit into this slate for you?
He looks like another solid option. He's a nice pivot if you want to leave some salary on the table and just swap like one of the higher price guys. He's actually one of the higher price guys, but he looks fine. He looks great. He definitely has the potential to be the high scoring player on the slate. On a 2-game slate, the way things are positioned, the way the value sticks out, going to probably need him. The way things are looking, if he's going to be that guy. And he's certainly been him this season. He's going to be an all-star, going to represent Utah Jazz in the home all-star arena this season. So he's been really impressive. And there's a reason why he was a lottery pick, and maybe he's a late bloomer. And it took all the way up in Utah to prove that. He looks great. I don't expect 13 to 20, but I can certainly see the shot attempts be around 20. I don't expect 9 to 13. You really are hoping for some extra rebounds along the way, but he looks solid. I have no issues taking some chances on Lauri Markkanen in a wizard spot at all. He looks really good. I mean, the chalk tonight is really solid, which makes things really frustrating at times, but on a 2-game slate, there's so many ways I think we can pivot around some different roster construction builds and hopefully find ourselves.
Are any of those guys at the forward spot? I mean, I will say Jared Vanderbilt was going to pull more ownership. He's kind of in no man's land now at 5,900. He's coming off of a game where he played 32 minutes against Detroit and just smashed. I don't know if those minutes are necessarily repeatable right off the bat here. I think it might turn into a little bit of a hot hand approach. We did see him start next to Kessler. That's a plus, but they could very easily deviate away from that, especially, if they have a nothing like Taj Gibson playing the backup center minutes. You can put anybody you want out there. You don't need anybody defensively to worry about that. But 5,900 for a guy with a really nice rebound rate that's north of 18%, a guy that doesn't need a lot of usage, but can have definite double-double potential if he gets upwards of 30 minutes. Do you see him running back what he did in Detroit last game?
He certainly can. He certainly has that within him. That was a huge outlier game for him with like all things put together. You really want him to take a little bit more shots offensively. I know there's no Olynyk, and that can certainly happen more consistently for him with no Olynyk on the court. Yeah, it's a 2-game slate. He's certainly going to play upwards of 30 plus minutes, barring any foul trouble or injury. I like him. I think he's another one of those sneaky guys who can come in a little bit under-owned than usual, and I think we should take some chances on Vanderbilt yet again tonight.
Yeah, we got the official starting lineup, and it is Najee Marshall indeed starting for the New Orleans Pelicans. McCollum, Jones, Marshall, Murphy, Valanciunas. Any reaction to Najee getting the start, considering, I don't know, he's 3,700 on DraftKings.com. That seems useful.
Yeah, Marshall looks pretty outstanding yet again today. Not yet again. Looks outstanding with no
for the first
Zion
time in a long time.
Yeah. I definitely think Najee Marshall is someone we should take some chances on for sure in significant fashion. I'm going to be looking and adjusting my exposure to Najee Marshall right now. I'm really curious what that ownership is going to come in at, if it's going to go up a bit more. Marshall is someone who's, when given minutes, has been rock solid, and I think we can expect this in a Spurs matchup for sure.
76 ego. Eric Lindquist, describe Kuzma's defensive prowess. Who will defend Markkanen? Well, glad you asked, because these are the things I enjoy doing. On a 2-gamer, I get to do these things, and I get to talk about things from a real basketball aspect where I don't always get that opportunity. I used to do that with Rinpack every single night on the Slate starter, but those days of yore, those are the days of yore. Now we just go along and, break down 14 gamers like we have tomorrow. But Kyle Kuzma this season, it's in 31 games. He's played 31 of the 32 total games for Washington. He's been an 84th percentile defender, 87th percentile in terms of EPN. That's EPM estimated player plus minus. So you need to be looking at some of this stuff from time to time. Dunks and threes is the easiest place. They're a pro basketball analysis site. You're able to find everything very, very quickly. But 84th percentile defender, that's noisy because he's been a baseline average defender throughout his entire career. The rebounding rate is what really took off when he went to Washington last year. We saw that even alongside Porzingis this season, 78th percentile in terms of defensive rebound rate. So I like Kyle Kuzma as a real life basketball player at this point. I think he fits the cog of what the Washington Wizards need. They needed somebody to fill up a lot of minutes at the power forward where, it wasn't, Avdija really wasn't getting it done at that point in time. You didn't really have Hachimura emerge coming out of Gonzaga the way that they had wanted him to. Anthony Gill's just filler. Same thing with Daniel Gafford. Like, he can play small ball 5 and makes all the sense in all the land. And speaking of starting lineup from the Wizards, Morris, Beal, Kispert, Kuzma, and Gafford once again starting for the Washington Wizards. See, timely news. Love these things. But Kyle Kuzma rounding it out. He is going to be defending Markkanen and positionless basketball for the most part, but that matchup seems pretty unavoidable here. Gafford, Kessler, Markkanen, Kuzma, so on and so forth. But let's finish out the forward position. Najee, talked about any other punts. Is there anybody super contrarian that you're finding yourself getting to? Any Malik Beasley in your life? Any Dyson Daniels in your life? Anybody off the board that you're going to?
Yeah, I think taking some flyers on a guy like Malik Beasley, even on DraftKings where you get that 3-point bonus, I think is well worth it on a 2-game slate. He's one of those guys who can get microwave hot, is kind of like a term for him. I think he definitely can get hot. He can definitely get hot from the outside and put in those threes, and that's especially on DraftKings. I'm curious what Kispert's ownership is going to come in at when starting. I know he's not exciting at all, but it's a 2-game slate. I'm willing to take some chances. He's going to play a decent amount of minutes, maybe mid-20s potentially, with no Avdija, Rui coming off an injury. He's another guy who can shoot the 3. He might be kind of off the board a little bit. We'll see how much ownership is going to go to him. I don't expect much, but it's just another situation to keep an eye on.
All right, 3 super chats to get caught up with. Then we'll get to the center position. We'll get our lineups in, take any questions at the end, and we will get ourselves the heck up out of here. I know that I have to finish up some NFL Showdown lineups as well, do some recording tonight. Looking forward to that one. Looking forward to this ridiculous football game as well. But, of course, the NBA, that's where it's at. First, super chat. It just disappeared from me. I know it was making fun of me, though. A sunflower, $5. That pick, the pick that I never want to see again. Looks like Eric just got shot in the back with a super soaker while simultaneously noticing the person in front of him was filming it. That is very specific, and I'm glad that it didn't get graphic in a bad way, because as I was reading it, I was expecting a turn. You know what? Expect the worst. You'll be pleasantly surprised once in a while, Ryan. Teddy Wayman, $5. Eric, over under 0.5 blocks for Zach Collins. Well, I have Rinpack here, the prop king, the absolute stud of all studs in all of the land. Zach Collins, going to be playing backup Jakob Poeltl there at the 5. I am pulling up my projections on him, and I mean, you better be getting juice on the over, right? Like, that's got to be part of it. At this number, let's see, where is it at? What is the line? Odd Shopper, come on now.
I wonder what the line is. It's a prop that I probably would personally avoid. Maybe it's on one of the pick'em sites, that being.
Yeah, we can say Prize Picks. We can say No House Advantage. We could say any site we wanted to. We can do whatever we want, Ryan. No rules.
All right. Yeah, no, if it's one of them pick'em sites, as gross as it sounds, I will take my chances on the over, but stay away from me type of situation.
That looks perfectly efficient at 0.5, which is weird because he's either going to hit it or he's not. That's the nature of the hook. That's why Captain Hook exists. He's had at least one block shot in 4 of his past 5. You know what else happened? The minutes have gone down because Jakob Poeltl has come back the last 2. The minutes have trended down to 24, 23, still gotten there in both of those. I would lean the over, but I don't want to play that. Hopefully that helps. Let's go to Trey versus Clarkson on DK. That's from Tab Jones. So Trey versus Clarkson on DK. Did you have a final say on that? Did I talk you into more Trey Jones?
You did, but I'm still going to go with Clarkson.
Thanks, pal. Appreciate you. Duke didn't like that. I don't know what I did. Let's go to the center position, shall we? Where Jonas Valanciunas makes all the sense in all the land. No Larry Nance. I don't expect a bajillion fantasy points. I said that before. 73 last time out makes a lot of sense. Oh, never mind. I come back to interrupt you because we have the Spurs starting lineup, kind of important, and it is indeed Romeo Langford, Jones, Vassell, Langford, Sochan, and Poeltl. Anything that stands out to you there, Ryan?
Sochan back in the lineup over
back in the starting lineup.
Back over Keita Bates-Diop there. So you can definitely take some chances on any of those Spurs starters, and maybe even Josh Richardson off the bench. So a situation where I'm willing to take. They're going to be low owned. The Spurs team, I think, is going to come in pretty low owned, which makes them a little bit more appealing on this 2-game slate. The more and more I think about it, so kind of a situation to take advantage there. Jeremy Sochan is fine. I think he's like 2 years away from being a good NBA player. Maybe he's young, he's raw. Another French player who's has some potential, but I don't think it's necessary where guys like Najee Marshall exist, and Marshall just looks that much better than guys like Sochan and Romeo Langford, in my opinion.
Yeah, I crunched out 50 lineups with pretty limited randomness just to kind of see how much Sochan I would get to on this slate, because I was like, oh, now that he's starting, I put him in for 24 minutes and just changed that, made that more of the baseline. They still have Doug McDermott there. They still have Zach Collins there. Bassey can play a minute if need be. Like, I really don't think he goes beyond the 24, 26 minute threshold. And even putting him in for 24, Najee Marshall just blows him out of the water.
Yeah. And Marshall has the higher minute ceiling, higher fantasy production ceiling, everything put together. Marshall just seems a better play. Sans the projected ownership, which I think makes sense why Marshall is projected the way he is.
Yeah. Comic Sans, if you will. I don't know.
Was that your favorite font to use on your high school paper?
No, I don't even know if I had a favorite font. I think I was just a boring Times Roman kid with my paper or whatever. I think we had like a specific font we had to do in college, but I don't remember high school what I liked.
I see. Nothing I was in the transition when Microsoft changed their default to Calibri, I think, instead of Times New Roman. Yeah.
You fancy like that. Let's do the rest of these centers because, yeah, we're in agreement. Jonas Valanciunas confirmed good play. Yes.
Yes, yeah. Valanciunas looks outstanding. And I guess in the sake of a 2-game slate, let's talk about the ways he can fail. He can fail foul trouble, and Valanciunas is certainly a guy who has a history of picking up fouls in a hurry. Can definitely get injured. Unlikely in this situation against the Spurs and limited front court options. I see like that benching. If Larry Nance was available, potentially, but not in this situation here. If you want to get off of him for the sake of ownership, I suggest you really don't need to. I think there are other options in other positions where we can get across from him. The opportunity cost on the slate is Valanciunas. I think that's kind of how the slate is positioned for us tonight.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to find a way to get different and do something that not everybody's doing. And I think the center position is probably where that's going to be for me now. I mean, Daniel Gafford's only at 28%. If that's going to be true, then never mind. But what do you think about Zach Collins today? Because he's at 4,900. Walker Kessler's at 5,400. I really like getting to both of them if you're playing more than 5-10 lineups, trying to insert some of those guys over Valanciunas and Gafford. At current ownership with Gafford, there's no way that I wouldn't play more Gafford, but I'm pretty sure that number is going to end up being higher than 28%. Are Zach Collins and Walker Kessler guys that you have interest in?
I definitely have some interest in Walker Kessler. Collins, not so much. I mean, on FanDuel, you're losing a center spot going to Kessler, and majority of my lineups are just going to Valanciunas. It's for Kessler, I feel like he's gonna project similar to Dan Gafford in terms of just fantasy points, but the ownership potentially Kessler's gonna be a little bit lower owned there, while Zach Collins is gonna be superiorly low owned. And how does Collins get there? I think Jakob Poeltl's minutes should be trending up, while Collins' minutes should be trending down. I don't know if there's been any news or notes based on Jakob Poeltl's minutes going up or anything, but I don't think it's necessary. I'm just gonna go to Valanciunas. Okay. I don't think it's all that necessary in my opinion.
Yeah. So the Poeltl thing is difficult because he did have some foul issues, nothing crazy there, but it was also a blowout win for him. He didn't have to close. Playing 21, I think he has 28 minutes in him if this game is competitive. So I will say that. I'm not in love with the 6,400 Jakob Poeltl. I would rather even go a little bit cheaper, just get myself to Kuzma, Markkanen, and whomever else at that power forward spot. I think that makes sense. And then trying to find Kessler or Collins into some of those spots as well. Again, a lot of it's just going to be dependent. I feel like the Jared Vanderbilt thing was such a hot hand approach. And then Walker Kessler played 27 minutes against Detroit. I mean, you tell me he gets 27 minutes again in this spot against Washington without Porzingis and a slap-happy Daniel Gafford. I'm pretty happy to try to take that shot.
Yeah, I think that's definitely. I like Walker Kessler a decent amount today. I think that's definitely a fine reason to go to him. On FanDuel, you're going to be unique if you go to Kessler over Valanciunas for sure. Very, very different than the rest of the field.
Well, speaking of getting different, we got a question from John Good, $1.99. He asks, Jose Alvarado or Dyson Daniels on DK for you today, Ryan?
Man, I don't have that much interest in either one. I'm going to go with Alvarado. I'm not the biggest Alvarado stan whatsoever, but in this situation,
kind of got to do it.
I think you got to go with Alvarado.
All right. I have one guy that I want to ask you about. I think I might have overlooked him a little bit, but seen a lot of chat. A lot of chatter in chat about such things. What is your interest in Will Barton today on the Washington side? You do lose Denny Avdia, and I think there's a lot of ways these minutes can get filled up, but he is pulling no ownership at 6%. I expected that to start trailing up, and it looks like it's just not. He's at 4,300. There are times where he just gets out to a hot start and they extend him to 33, 36 minutes. They have no Avdia. They have no Porzingis. I think, if this game starts getting a little wonky, maybe he stays out there and gets the opportunity to have a lot of usage opposite Bradley Beal. How do you feel about Will Barton on today's slate?
I like going to Will Barton on a 2-game slate. He's one of those exciting 2-game slate players. Another guy who can get microwave hot. I think he's definitely on the table for outperforming that salary. If you were to play this slate 100 times, like how often does he outperform Herb Jones? I think it's 3 out of every 10 times, maybe not 3, maybe 2 out of every 10 times. He outperforms Herb Jones. So that's like kind of the decision point there with Will Barton, in my opinion. I like taking some chances with Will. No issues.
All righty. Well, guys, hit that like button. I haven't asked for likes that much throughout this show. Just wanted to ask you about it a little bit here. I'm finishing out my lineups here. We can go position by position too and talk about who we have at our favorite spots. I want to make sure also, because I know you play 48,832 different sites. I want to make sure you get the opportunity to get your lineups in here. One quick way I can do that is just tell you guys, NBA, 3 days free right now in the description box below. If you guys want to check out all of the great things like the lineup generator that the guys so eloquently did on the last show, I don't want to give them credit because they were mean to me per usual, but I'm going to. They did a great job explaining a lot of the ins and outs of that. You guys need to check out our ownership projections on a day like this. Almost more pivotal, I feel like, on a short slate like this, to be very, very in tune with who's going to be overowned, who's going to be getting overlooked. That's kind of where the Will Barton play kind of shows up from. But 3 free days of our Platinum tools completely free to you right now in the video description box below. It takes you 30 seconds. Go sign up for that. Take advantage of that offer. Not going to be around forever. So, point guard. Who is your favorite? Well, I mean, who are your highest 3 owned players at point guard today, Ryan?
McCollum, Beal.
So just guard in general. You're just doing guard in general.
Yeah, McCollum and Beal.
That's fine. Okay. I mean, that's the chalk. Give me an off the wall play because I must make you.
Monty Morris.
Yeah, I just was looking at him, trying to decide what to do with this last hand build lineup that I'm doing, but that was very, very strange that it came across that way. Forward spot, my friend.
You know what? I actually haven't built DraftKings, but I'll tell you my FanDuel forwards. It's going to be Kuzma and Murphy, and then Marshall.
Do you remember Trey Murphy Day last year?
I did. I actually watched that game live.
Buddy, that was the greatest. That was the greatest thing ever. We made all the money.
Yeah, no, that was a good game. And then look how far he's come. Now he's a legitimate offensive threat on a really good basketball team.
Legitimate offensive threat. I just like the kid. I like him a lot. I like Najee Marshall. I like Devin Vassell, shooting guard, small forward. Kind of a guy that he's not going overlooked. Everybody's pretty popular on a 2-gamer, but at 41% or 42% compared to Lauri Markkanen coming in higher owned, I would rather go to Vassell for cheaper there, 900. Play 2 different centers there, get to some Kuzma. Because again, Kuzma, I'm just shorting, it looks like today. I need to find some paths to get to a little bit more of him before lock. Hashtag play everybody. But going to the center spot, Valanciunas, Gafford, so hard to get away from. Do you have anybody else that might kind of mix in there other than Walker Kessler, who we talked about earlier?
Other than Walker Kessler, I mean, it's Valanciunas by far for me. So I'm not getting to that much other players in my opinion. I do think Jakob Poeltl makes it for an excellent tournament play on this slate. Just because I do think those minutes should be going up, coming back from injury at some point. So he just makes for an outstanding tournament play, and he certainly has the capability of outscoring Valanciunas. But I just think getting off Valanciunas might be a big mistake tonight.
I am probably on board with it. Looking at your FanDuel lineups, you got Gafford there too. You can only play one center. You got Jonas Valanciunas, who I just said, and Jakob Poeltl there. How is your ownership breaking down on FanDuel between those 3?
It's not really a breakdown. It's just Valanciunas on his own island.
Really?
Yeah.
Just
I mean,
sitting up on his throne.
Yeah, he's sitting on his big bot. I think he's No, he's not Bosnian, is he? I forget where he's from. He's from Lithuania.
There you go.
But yeah, it's
shout out Bosnia anyway.
He is by far like the most highest owned center for me. Almost 4x higher than everyone else on the slate.
Why did Jordan's camera go so blurry? Or am I going blind? What happened? Did you do that on purpose? Okay. Good talk. Glad we had it. Devin Davis, $2. Thank you so much. Is there any must-play Jazz players? No.
No one is like, just because of a 2-game slate, I know we've been honing in on like the solid chalk plays, good plays here. But on a 2-game slate, you can make an argument that someone at a certain ownership becomes a bad player, right? Yes. I think. So definitely keep that in mind when you're building multiple lineups on a 2-game slate. But the way things are positioned right now, no must play Jazz. We also did get word Colin Sexton is on a minutes limit.
There you go.
Tonight.
Kind of expected such things. And plus, he's kind of been on a minutes limit all season long because he's been limited so much when everybody's been healthy. Hey, everybody's healthy here again. So he was playing like low 20s minutes. Most of those spots he had been starting there. Mike Conley got back. He got hurt, and now it's been 2+ weeks. So like what, 20? What did it say, a specific minutes limit or nothing at all there?
No, nothing. Let me take a quick look again.
I'm going to put him in for 22. We had him at 25 here on the side. I'm going to put him at 22 minutes. So we'll take like 3 away from him there. And we're going to go to, I'm going to give Nickeil Alexander-Walker a couple. Let's go 14 there. He's not going to show up. Like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I still can't get there. He's 4,100. All the guards are healthy now. Literally only Kelly Olynyk out for this team tonight. Doesn't really do a lot for me. Definitely no interest in Sexton or any guard not named Jordan Clarkson, and even Mike Conley not really getting to.
Yeah, no, I think taking a look at that situation, there's no must play Jazz. And I mean, going back to the backcourt situation, we've been talking on Beal and McCollum. I would rather I brought up Monty Morris. I like Morris's minutes from last game. I know it was just Porzingis missing. It's not like he was a direct beneficiary, but the minutes there just seem nice. And Monty Morris is not the guy to be the guy to take a bunch of shots. You're really hoping for some high efficient shooting and maybe a double based off assists and some failures in some other guard position spots for him to pay off. On a 2-game slate, he has that within him in this Utah spot.
I'm pulling up the premium Discord here, seeing some people that want me to get to some questions there. Here we go. Now I'm tagged. This is great. Let me know. 333 for tonight from Jets World. Daniels, Alvarado, or Sokan for sake of being different. I would actually go Sokan at this point.
Interesting. I don't like any of those guys, but I think I'll just agree with you with Sohan.
Thank you. That was nice to hear. Let me see. Anybody else in the premium Discord? I don't see. Nope, not anything else there. We've got 3 minutes to go. Just tell me you have your lineups uploaded, Ryan.
Wrapping up one last, please.
Okay. God, trying to get all of my. God, just the worst. You know what's the worst is all of this crazy. The Rainmakers, they've made the interface a little bit better, but trying to get these lineups together is just. Oh, it is the most labor-intensive thing ever. Hopefully it gets clean for next year. That would be great, but I got my DK NBA lineups up, got my DK Rainmaker set up. Now I got to finish my NFL Showdown lineups. I know the stream is going on over there, so if you guys want to, I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be going back and forth between the streams, building for both, so go check out Lofty hanging out over on the other stream, simultaneous of ours. Not to encourage you guys to leave us right away, but just saying. Any final words for the people, Ryan, that they need to know here as we go to lock? Anything that you're paying attention to before the night game? Anything whatsoever?
No, keep an eye on just future if like Porzingis remains out and like what happens with those Gibson minutes. If Gibson continues to close, Gafford going forward won't look as a solid play because I would be scared away going to Gafford if those minutes are limited. And let's see what Jakob Poeltl's minutes look like for future. If his minutes are going up, I think he makes for a solid option.
All right. We've got XXX Cubs fan in there. Is Rinpack upset he had to be on the B team today? What are you talking about? We pull more views? We're feeling frisky over here? You spelled A wrong. That's what I believe.
I'm not upset. I wanted to be on this team.
This is my dude. People don't know. Ryan, he is the reason that I am here. So this is my good dude. So good to be on, hanging out, doing a show. Rocklatex, I heart dead air. There's never dead air with me. When has there ever been dead air with me unless I'm staring through the soul of Adam Scherer and he deserves it? I can't think of a time. Jordan's just like, I would like to hear you less. Is that true? Love you too. Guys, that is it. That is the NBA Live Before Lock show. This was an absolute blast. Make sure you sign up at BetMGM below. Use that video description box. Go to that link, click on it, deposit that $25 or $10 or more it is. But the easiest way to think about it, you play 25, you get a risk-free bet. So if that loses, you get another 25. If that $25 bet loses, hey, you still get a $25 free bet. That's up to 3 $25 bets for you at your disposal. So check out that offer. Check out the 3 free days we have going here at Stokastic. All great stuff. But thank you so much to Rayen for being here. Stay safe if you're in the Midwest, East Coast. Know a lot of flights are getting canceled. Have a safe holidays. Love you guys. We'll see you guys later.